Hello! Tonight we settle into an even breath and open a very old doorway, the beliefs and culture of the Paleolithic, where the first ideas of soul and the sacred first rose in firelight. Picture yourself standing at the mouth of a cold cave, your breath turning to a fine mist. Outside it is dark like deep water. Inside is another night, quiet and thick, like the throat of the earth. A small flame lifts the darkness layer by layer. On the damp walls appear red ochre, charcoal, ash of burned bone, faint handprints, and herds of bison running across the stone slope. Time has settled on them for 10,000, 30,000, 40,000 years. The warmth of human hands is still there. As your eyes adjust, you realise this is not only painting, it is an entrance to the inner life of your ancestors. They coloured the stone to touch the unseen, sprinkled red ochre on the dead as if sending a ray of sun to a long sleep, shaped fertile bodies from mammoth ivory as a prayer for the season, and played flutes made of bone to call the breath of midnight. Those ideas did not disappear. They changed shape, travelled with migrations, clung to collective memory, then returned in the wind of deep caves, in strings of shell beads, in repeating circles and spirals. This episode is a slow journey across that mental map. You will move from chambers glowing red with ochre to the edge of graves set with flowers and shells. Stop where bones know how to sing. Pause before figures turning from human into animal. Then step out under a sky of stars where everything carries spirit. All of it rests on archaeological and genetic evidence, told at a low cadence, to settle the body into quiet while keeping curiosity gently awake. If you can, dim the light. Lie comfortably and take one long breath. Let the small flame in your hand open the way. We begin to read the map of darkness, one mark at a time, one breath at a time, one Paleolithic step at a time. On certain ice-hard nights, prehistoric people left camp on a rhythm of their own, not the rhythm of the hunt. The fire outside kept a ring of warm embers, while the group going deep into stone carried small torches and pouches of powdered pigment tucked beneath their arms. The path was not for many, with steep pitches, tight clefts, and fallen ceilings. They followed pale mineral blooms and stopped where the cave roof rose like the back of a breathing animal. The firelight went dark red, bodies thinned to smoke. Here the noise of the world fell away to only drip water, a small crackle of flame, and the beat of the heart remained. The bundles of powder were made from red ochre ground fine and mixed with animal fat and water, sometimes with a little tree resin. Charcoal was crushed. Ash of burned bone added a different tone to the black. They sprayed colour through hollow bone tubes, used fingers, palms, stone slivers, sometimes a half-burned coal. The natural grain of the wall was chosen first, as if the surface already suggested what would appear. A swelling could become the shoulder of a bison. A thin crack could be the bridge of a horse's nose. The painting did not fight the rock, it cooperated with it, as if people and stone were remembering the same animal at once. In the uneven torchlight, the animals appeared with colour and motion. Bison, red deer, horses, ibex, woolly rhinoceros, sometimes cave lions and bears. In a few places, rare scenes show up. A paired human figure like a sign tilted before a bison's horns, or a hybrid form with an animal head and a human body, opening a blurred border. Beside the animals are simple marks that repeat with persistence. Lines, dots, grids, fern leaves, lozenges, bands laid in parallel, scattered here and there. A hand pressed to the rock and edged by blown pigment leaves its own negative. The handprint is a word with a name that needs no sound. The beauty here is the beauty of intent. Not all paintings were made where they are easy to see. Many lie deep in recesses that are hard to reach, where you have to crawl and slide and pass through stretches of total dark. This suggests another purpose, not made for everyone to see and not meant for display. Those who went inward went for a meeting. They laid colour on stone as if placing an offering. They chose night, when the world thins and the line between human and other can shift. There are theories about why this art was made. Early researchers called it hunting magic, as if drawing the prey were a way to hold part of its fate. In recent decades, hybrid figures and repeating signs, together with the deep locations, have led many archaeologists toward another frame, altered states of consciousness. People speak of a cave mind, a kind of map of inner experiences that arise when a person enters trance, often through rhythm, darkness, flame, and sometimes flute song, tapping, and the bite of hunger and cold. The geometric motifs may be endogenous illusions of the visual system. The hybrids could be a way to give language to meetings with otherworldly allies. The animals are patrons and emblems of power, of the seasons, of food. This does not make the art empty and occult. It places it at the centre of practical life. Hunter-gatherers had to understand animals to live. They did that by tracking, and also by learning to see the animal in stone, in darkness, in memory. They painted to train a kind of attention, to braid ecological memory with symbolic memory. The cave wall becomes ledger, altar, drumhead, mirror. You can look for a long time and not come to the bottom of it. At places like Lascaux or Altamira, broad colour fields sweep with a natural vault. Ancient artists used stone ridges to raise relief and exploited the curve of the ceiling so bodies swell and tendons stand out. In some deep recesses, handprints appear. Some very early caves, like Maltravieso, preserve red negative hands thought to belong to Neanderthals. Those hands feel like an agreement about presence. We were here, we watched, we knew these motifs, and we passed them on. Darkness is part of the technique. Torchlight jumps across the rock and the animals seem to move. Night-trained eyes are quick to small contrasts. If you stand still long enough, cold seeping from stone will reach your chest. Resin will sing at a torch tip. The smell of burning fat will settle into damp earth. The body slows, the breath deepens. Your feet meet gravel and your hand meets stone. At that threshold, thought leaves daytime tasks and turns by itself towards symbol. You do not need dialogue. Your body becomes the tool that reads and records. A small crew often shared the concrete tasks. Someone mixed colour and tended fire. Another drew outlines. Another kept the ritual pulse. A branch of bone tapping the wall at a steady pace could hold a cycle without a drum. Children might come along to a point, not deep, standing where the light is wide and the handprints are low. Through many generations, hand marks at different heights layer over one another and become a field of shared life. The choice of animals does not mirror the full menu. Some sites show many large beasts, though kitchen bones show people a wider range. That difference says the painting served aims beyond a food tally. The wall animal is an original template for a bundle of attributes: strength, migration, the direction of a season, birth cycles, behaviour. It may also be an emblem for a group, a totem that links a community to a symbolic lineage. When a person looks up at the painting, they see not only food but themselves in a web tied to nature. Many signs repeat: parallel bands, lattice squares, tree forms, clusters of dots. If trance experience produces basic visual forms, then those signs are like letters, and the animals are words. In the dark long enough, eyes see rays, specks, self-born vortices. Placing them on rock draws the inner world outward. Ancient artists had an intuition for this. They did not name neural phenomena, but they knew how to turn them into language. A few places record rare scenes, a human body falling before a bison. This does not sweeten life. The hunt is risk, and the community must learn to recount risk to remember and to warn. The picture has no lines of text, yet composition, posture, and relative size carry the message. In a culture without writing, rock is the most reliable archive. Every added layer of colour is a layer of memory. The acoustic side cannot be ignored. There is reason to suspect painting zones match spots with fine echo. Taps on the wall there come back thick and hold the beat. In many caves, clusters of animals lie near one another as if forming a silent choir. When someone keeps time, reverberation stretches the space, and a whispering hum gathers. That experience is strong enough to move a person into a different attention, where symbols come alive. Not every cave holds art. Some were for shelter, some for butchering, some for tools. Places with images are usually set apart, natural sanctuaries. A single cave can carry many layers of use, by year, by season, by climate phase. When the ice retreated, the animals moved and people followed. The art moved with them or stayed behind as a hook for descendants to read. More important still is the role of red ochre. That red is at once the colour of earth and of blood and fire. It appears on walls, on objects, on human bone, and in burials. On rock it begins a through line. One red ties cave to right, hunt to birth, the living to the dead. When a hand covered in red presses to stone and pulls away, leaving a hand-shaped gap, it is a very quiet way to say this is where I touch the world, and when I go, the shape of that touch remains. Some places hold memory so clearly they slow the breath of whoever enters. In southwestern France, Lascaux is a broad dome where running bison, horses, and red deer cross the ceiling as if swimming through air. The ancient artist read the natural curve of wall and vault with precision, chose ridges for outlines, set colour fields to torchlight so bodies swell and necks stand out. Not everyone could go there. Some deep rooms require you to crawl through narrow halls and then open into space that rings like the inside of a drum. In another recess, a rare scene appears. A simplified human body falling before a bison's horns. Death is not hidden. It enters art as a lesson and teaches the community to look without shouting. Farther north on the Iberian Peninsula, Altamira has another voice. Red, black, and brown fields of bison and deer lean into natural swellings of the ceiling and use every rise and dip to build relief. You can see finesse in the way colours were mixed and bled to raise motion. The human hand is there as well, not speaking, just laying down a calm presence. Even now, when visitors see a replica, a sense of ritual field remains. Not because of labels, but because of how space is built. When you enter, there is the murmur of stone, a far rhythm, an imagined firelight trembling across the layers. Chauvet is different again. Lions, rhinoceroses, bears. The animals of fear lie still, long-eyed, heads lowered, bodies gathered. Their poses show the painter understood motion, safe distance, and the shiver in the chest when you stand near a predator. In some panels, layers of painting stack, later hands following earlier, not erasing but adding in a dialogue across time. Many figures lie deep, showing this was not a living room wall but an inner room of a community mind. Few entered, and each entry was an event. Elsewhere the art is simpler, strings of dots, parallel strokes, lattices. Placed beside the full bodies of animals they seem dry. Read as units of a visual alphabet, they carry the power of repetition. A block of dots might mark a season or a route, or could be the byproduct of seeing in the dark when the visual system generates rays, specks, swirls. Putting them on rock pulls inner images outside and gives what is seen inside a place to dwell. Many images sit where they are hard to reach. That hints at ritual force. If the goal were only to teach names to the young, painting closer to fire in a wide place would be easier. By going inward, the community accepts risk and labour in exchange for a different quality of attention. Darkness is not an enemy. It is a tool. It thins the world and pushes a person into long focus. Torch shimmer and rough stone together make animals feel alive. No extra words are needed because the viewer's body responds to the illusion of motion by itself. Handprints are special. A hand's negative is like someone setting their presence into time. At Maltravieso, a red hand more than 60,000 years old is thought to be the work of Neanderthals. It stretches the timeline. Art is not only the story of Homo sapiens in late Europe. Press the hand to the stone. Blow colour, pull away. Leave the gap with the exact shape of fingers, and you have a small rite rich in meaning. The hand is tool, tactile memory, a map of a life. Leaving it deep in a cave is like tucking a piece of a person into the shared archive. Across sites there is a common thread. Materials, red ochre for warm red, charcoal for deep black, burned bone powder for a soft tone, animal fat as binder, water for slip. Sometimes tree resin to help pigment cling to damp surfaces. The technique did not stop at smearing. There was planning, trial, correction. Someone would test colour on a small patch, see how it shines in torchlight, then lay a large field. Timing matters too. A night of calm wind, steady humidity, and even drip makes a good ground for a painting right. If you had to answer why, there is likely no single why. One layer is practical, training the eye, keeping a collective record, reminding people to see the animal as a sum of many angles. One layer is ritual, inviting, asking, warning, sharing. One layer is inner, going into darkness to meet oneself, not alone but inside a communal frame. They braid together like layers of colour on rock. Each entry adds data to the shared store and assurance besides. We can pass this winter because we have passed others. When the group leaves the cave, they quietly pinch out their torches and leave a few live coals, so the thin smoke can disappear into cracks. They carry the smell of earth and red stains on their fingertips. Outside, wind opens the space. Above, Stars are thick. No one names them as we do now, yet they all lie within a walker's net of attention. A wall has just been touched again, like tying a cord to the inside. They know that after the next season and the next herds and the next ice, they will return and add one more stroke to the cord. If cave art is a temple without brick walls, then red ochre is the colour of right. It is not only on rock, it goes with people at edge hours of life. That red appears in pits of burial, clings to bone, to ornaments, to small hand objects. On the wall it writes an appointment. On the dead it opens a path. Even without writing, the community had a grammar of colour for birth and death and hope. The idea of a cave mind comes up often when explaining motifs. No need to assume drugs or strange agents. Darkness itself, sound, cold, tapping, and breath-warmed fire are enough to change the texture of awareness. The visual system generates endogenous forms and projects bands and dots and grids. Fatigue and sustained focus thin the border between self and surroundings. In that state, seeing a human-animal hybrid may not be invention, but a natural product of the body testing another set of traits. Putting it on rock legitimizes the experience and turns it into a common asset. Do not leave out acoustics. Many painting spots match good echo points, which suggests beat and voice were part of the rite. When a regular tap touches the wall, the answer thickens the room as if you were walking inside a stone animal. In those minutes, the images are not still. They vibrate with the beat, change with the flame, live with the group's breath. No one in the middle is required to believe anything. They only have to breathe and watch and let associations join. In the wider view, cave art does not sit outside economy. It records creatures vital to survival, though not only as a menu. The animal becomes a sign of season and of migration and of common law. A group may claim to be the children of a species, not in blood but in spirit. There a totem appears, a sign that gathers people and links them to a set of taboos and rites, a way to choose partners, a way to handle conflict. To look at the animal is to look at law. Beside the large panels are personal signatures, a handprint, a charcoal line, a cluster of dots in a corner. These private marks do not break the rite. They give it another dimension. A single ceiling can hold the hands of 3 generations. A young person's hand low, a middle one higher, and elders near the entrance because they no longer go deep. That rhythm makes an unseen graph of life. When the young grow and duck past their own mark, they carry a felt sense of being held. At the technical level, someone in the community kept the frame. Not everyone could paint over certain places at will. There was a soft order built on respect for experience. Those with many seasons went deeper. Learners stood in the light and watched and mixed. In this way, the visual language held its integrity. Geometric motifs repeat not out of poverty but by design. They are a refrain returning to its place and comforting the ear. The usual pattern shows animals in fine detail and people as schematics. Many causes could lie behind this. Animals were the object of shared fixation. The person did not need to be visible inside the rite. When the aim is to work with natural forces, the human figure steps back and leaves room for symbol. Only in a few places does the human appear clearly, usually at border moments. Collision with beasts, a fall, or in hybrid form. These flashes are like snapshots and say a great deal with very little. Pull a line from paintings to camps outside the cave, and you see them in one mesh of adaptation. The cave is for rite and echo and dark. Outside are cookfires, tools, butchered meat, and hides stripped for clothing. The spaces complete each other like day and night. People carry pigment inward and carry earth smell outward. That exchange keeps art from being sealed off and instead sinks it into the most manual tasks. When a band moves with the seasons, the cave wall does not travel. It stays as a point to return to. Children grow up hearing about the deep room with an animal as big as 2 people. They wait for the right season and their turn to go in and press a hand to the wall or simply stand and watch. The moment feels like joining a clan, not by oath, but by the recognition of a familiar motif. Behind them the campfire is still warm. Before them the rock is cool. Between the 2 temperatures runs the breath the community practiced for years. Some scholars call the turn towards symbolic consciousness in this era the Big Bang of the mind. The phrase is metaphor but useful. Somewhere in a spread of hundreds of millennia, people began to use images to hold what cannot be grasped. The painting became a shelter for concepts. It holds memory not by sentence but by layout, by repetition, by order. It helps a community through weather and shortage and death. When you cannot test in winter, You test with memory and with a wall of stone. The idea of initiatory rite also comes up. Go in deep, stand before a panel, and open and close your eyes with the beat. Children come part way, adults farther. No need to put it into words because standing inside a structure of space and time and sound already speaks. Later the young come back out and learn to braid cord and hunt small game and read tracks. What entered them in the cave stays as a root. The next time they see a natural vein on a rock outdoors, they may suddenly see a body there. Pattern recognition born in rite proves useful in daily life. Caves with art do not stand alone. In the same times, people made small objects to carry. That is the next piece of the story. Here, to close this first piece, return to the wall's community work. It is where fear can be set down by drawing the great animal and looking at it calmly. It is where longing can be laid by scattering red as you lay sun over cold stone. It is where law is set by repeating a group's signs and a season and a route. In a world without money or granary or fence, the one store that can be shared across seasons is the store of images. Remember also that art was not a luxury. It cost labour and fat and charcoal and torches and night hours. The community invested. In return, art provided what nothing else could replace. A sense of ease inside uncertainty. When dark thickens and flame thins and wind sings at the cave mouth, the colour patch remains and does not shift. By its presence it says others came ahead. Someone stood here, someone saw and recorded. Feeling the link into a long chain lightens the private burden. The temper of the great site suggests regional variety. Lascaux shows the chase. Altamira displays surface. Chauvet faces fear. Maltravieso lays a hand on a longer span of history. From this variety we learn that rites have many voices. All use common material, choose the dark, and trust the power of form to carry meaning beyond the present season. If there is an unwritten rule here, it might be this. Train your eye to see the image in stone, because once you can see it, you're not completely alone before the ice. Then one evening the group leaves the cave again. They step under high sky where constellations scatter like seeds in black. Smoke is on their shoulders, red traces hard to wipe on their fingertips. At the forest edge a night animal calls once. On the grass the wind turns the ground to low waves. They go back to the fire and the children and the dividing of meat and the hide stretched near the flame. Yet in every eye the wall remains. In sleep they may see a herd of bison cross the ceiling without touching ground. In the morning they rise and take the new trail as their elders did before. In the gentle dark of a leather pouch, a body the size of a palm lies still like a winter seed. Curves swell, details are pared back, a quiet warmth lingers in the thin veil of red ochre on its surface. That small object has travelled with footsteps through open woods, frozen plains, and rocky shores from one fire to the next, like a private heartbeat of the community. Today people call them Venus figurines. The modern label is only a tag. What matters more is how these mini-bodies lived with Paleolithic people, entered rites, memory, and belief, and became something that carried meaning lightly yet endured. From a distance they form a series of female shapes with wide hips, full breasts, and rounded bellies that sometimes suggest pregnancy. Faces are often indistinct. Limbs are simplified. Hands and feet often disappear into the hole. The absence of detail is not a lack of skill. It feels like a choice. By leaving out what is not essential, the maker emphasizes the zones that speak most about birth and nurture. The result is a condensed body map, where the warm regions of life are enlarged like small fires on a cold ground. Materials came from whatever was at hand. Soft stones such as limestone, steatite, or calcite were favoured for their fine grain and ease of shaping. Bone and mammoth ivory allowed seamless curves with a milky sheen, like a layer of mist. In some places clay was rolled, formed, and fired, leaving some of the oldest ceramics known to our species. Under firelight the surface shifts from grey to brown, then to a light red when rubbed with red ochre. Modest size, most often a few centimetres to a few dozen centimetres, made them a natural fit for the hand, for the pouch, and for the mobile life of hunter-gatherers. It is no accident that portability itself was a key religious quality in a nomadic world. Certain place names have become part of the figurine's history. In Swabia in Germany, a small figure carved from ivory, at least 35,000 years old, stands among the earliest examples. In Moravia, where wind from the ice fields crosses low hills, fired clay figures appear together with traces of prehistoric kilns, proof that this community knew how to pass earth through fire to fix form. Farther east in cold Siberia, the figures carry other details, sometimes like wearing cloaks, showing a local layer of meaning about body and climate. Along the thread that runs from France to Siberia, these little Venuses form dense beads scattered along routes of migration. Why choose the female form? The plain answer stood that it is a sign of reproduction. Sounds simple, yet is not shallow. In a world where weather turns without warning, prey can vanish, ice can linger, and illness offers no notice. Every sign of birth is a promise. A community with many children who live through winter is a community with a future. Centering the swelling body of a woman in a small object is a way to craft a prayer form, a cord that ties hope to a surface you can touch. It is likely that some of the figures stood in rites that marked life's thresholds, such as beginnings, pregnancy, birth, and nursing. Red ochre on the surface may be the colour of blood and life, a red rhythm tying cave to grave, painted wall to hand held figure. One layer of meaning as mother is not enough to account for their diversity. Some figures swell strongly at belly and breast like a call to birth. Others are slimmer in the trunk and emphasise the curve of the hip, like the shift of a body standing. In some areas the surface is combed with a tool and shows parallel lines like cloth. Elsewhere horizontal strokes on the head suggest hair, a hood, or headgear. In that simplified yet unsloppy style, makers show a range of women in an icebound environment. Not a single archetype, but many faces of living bodies, reduced to shared cues so the community sees something familiar. One hypothesis holds that some figures are self-portraits. When a woman looks down at her own body, she does not see her face. She sees breasts, belly, and hips. From that vantage point, the proportions shift and the nearer zones are naturally enlarged. This could explain the absence of facial detail and the emphasis elsewhere. It is hard to prove for certain, but the idea reminds us that the figurines are not only things to be looked at. They are the outcome of looking from the maker's own body. By grasping, smoothing, shaping, and carving, the craft person transfers the feeling of skin and muscle onto stone, bone, or clay. The life of the figurine kept pace with a nomadic life. They are small and easy to carry, yet heavy with symbol. On long nights rhymed with ice, when fire sinks and wind hisses through rock seams, a small object can anchor a palm. Holding it is enough to recall a long chain of other hands. Laying it beside food fills a nameless little rite. Its spiritual use does not lie in display, and it lies in quiet repetition. Each touch resynchronizes the heart with the group's rhythm, a reassurance that needs no words. If cave art uses broad surfaces and deep dark to bridge people and nature, the Venus figurine uses small scale and touch to build another bridge closer to skin and more personal, yet not detached from the collective. Both share the same palette and materials. Red ochre remains the colour of life. Charcoal remains the line of definition. Ivory and bone remain the material of curves. In one sense, the figurine is a pocket shard of the cave world, a portable mini-shrine that carries the wall's rules through the long day's walk. Geography also matters. Most figurines belong to the Gravettian period, when Europe's climate was cool, ice thick, wind dry. In that setting, the body is honoured as a hearth. Tailored hides, cloaks, binding straps, and hoods are inventions that let human skin pass through wind. The figurines stress waist, hips, and breasts, the zones to keep warm and to nourish. Yet across the continent, regional variants appear. Some wear necklaces and belts, some are rounded like pebbles, some carry dense horizontal bands on the lower body like wrapping. The differences do not break a shared Venus language. They give it timbre. Like many regional voices singing a common prayer, the little object also touches the group's soft law. When everything must be carried on backs, anything not serving food or clothing needs a strong reason to be kept. The figurine's endurance through seasons and journeys shows that a community had agreed on their value. They may have been passed along maternal lines or gifted in rites of transfer. They may have stood at the edge of a grave and then returned to the pouch. In a time without fences or granaries, such small objects are mobile stores of belief, safe because they blend with the person, and durable because they are light and needed. On a short warm day, a maker sits by the fire and picks up a soft stone. A thin stone blade removes tiny flakes and leaves the large curves first. A bone awl dots the surface to give the hand purchase. Red ochre ground with fat is rubbed on in a thin coat, and a slow red spreads across the emphasized zones. There is no hurry. The figurine's time is not the time of a chase. It is the time of patient repetition. When finished, it rests in a palm. weighty like a nut, warm like a carefully wrapped coal. Night comes, the pouch opens. The figurine lies there with a few shell beads, a flint tip, and a cord. The fire breathes evenly. Wind at the cave mouth thins. In that hush, the presence of a palm-sized body becomes a sentence without words. It reminds the group that beneath the surprises of ice and animals, a deeper law still runs, a red thread from mother to child. From one band to another, from one day into the next, sleep arrives lightly, like fine red ochre dust settling on a surface, as not to hide it, but to warm it. Rebuilding everyday life around these small bodies reveals not one single rite, but an ecosystem of symbols that runs alongside the ordinary. At a campfire burning down, a figurine sits beside a bundle of points and dried fish bones. At a stream bank late in summer, it rests in a leather pouch with a few pale shells. On a cave floor dusted with thin red ochre, it prints a faint red mark into cold sand. Each setting is a cross-section that shows the figurine does not live on a separate altar. It drifts lightly among eating, clothing, moving, and remembering. Traces hint at life cycles where the figurine appears. When a woman's belly swells, the wrap around her is tied tighter, and one evening the figure is rubbed carefully with red ochre before being set back in the pouch. When a child opens its eyes in the warmth of hides, the figure lies near the bedding and can be touched like an invisible safety button. When a person leaves this world, a shallow pit is dug. Tool parts are laid nearby, a few shells and some food are added, and sometimes the figurine goes along and sometimes it is set back by the fire, a thread of continuity for those who remain. What archaeology keeps for us is the red on bone, the polish on figurine edges from being handled again and again, and positions within cultural layers near burial niches or hearth floors all tell the same story of quiet presence. The red of red ochre is a colour that runs through many rites. It is ground from iron-rich stone and mixed with fat or water, smeared on living skin at markers of life, smeared on the dead to return warmth to a cold body, and smeared on figurines to attach efficacy to a small thing. The red is not mere decoration. It is how Paleolithic people named a hard-to-name current that is at once blood and fire and the principle of life. The figurine wears that red like the simplest ceremonial robe and can be renewed many times with the seasons. Finds stretch from western limestone country to the ice plain edges near Siberia. Along that length the variants speak regional dialects. In cold dry parts of Europe, some figures have belts and hoods like mini versions of carefully cut and sewn garments used to defy wind. Elsewhere, repeated parallel strokes suggest the texture of hide clothes. The motif is both an aesthetic detail and a carved tactile memory. Some figures are rounded smooth like pebbles worn by water. Others keep sharp facets from stone tools in places where less polishing was done. Together they show a shared language about the body with a rich local vocabulary that shifts with climate, resources, and carving habits. Being small, light, and tough made figurines ideal for a mobile society, unlike a cave wall fixed to one place into a fixed darkness. The figurine allows ritual anywhere, beside a lake, while on the move, beneath a shelter of branches, in the middle of a busy hunting season. Mobility turns religion into a pocket map. Any space can be activated as sacred by placing the figure, sprinkling red ochre, or touching it in a familiar order. When everything must be packed on shoulders, what remains has passed a strict selection for meaning. Modern explanations tend to focus on reproduction and nurture, yet other layers run alongside. For some communities the figurine may be a totem in a wide sense. Not a single animal sign, but an emblem for the maternal line and the ties among the women of a group. When a girl comes of age, a figure might be placed in her hands as recognition of a new place in the community's cycle of care. When a woman leaves her band to join another, a figurine might go along as a gift, intimate and also linking one hearth to another. These hypotheses come from context. Figurines sometimes lie in settlement layers, not only in graves, they're polish points to long use. Their size makes them easy to carry while travelling. Another field of meaning lies in the relation between figurines and the human form in cave art. Cave paintings favour detailed animals and make people rare, small, or stylised, while the figurine centres the human in the mass. The reversal feels like a symbolic division of labour. The wall records collective memory about herds, roots, and relations with nature. The small figure keeps the body memory of birth and nurture, taking place in spaces close to skin. Both draw on the same techniques, the red of red ochre, the black of charcoal, or the cut of tools, but they press on different aims. In them, the Paleolithic gaze turns outward and inward at once and does not treat the two directions as a conflict. Some scholars see the figurine as a cognitive tool. By enlarging those parts of the body that relate to pregnancy, nursing, and energy stores, the figure becomes a tactile model of survival priorities. In a long hunger season, when bodies lean out, holding a swelling form can remind the group that the aim is not only to get through the day, but to secure new life. In this view, the figurine is both petition and simplified diagram of what a band must nourish to pass the icebound cycle. The craft language matters too. Choosing soft stone or ivory is not only about supply, it is about the feel desired. Limestone holds red ochre well and keeps the red across time. Ivory allows seamless curves and endures handling inside a pouch. Clay needs fire to harden but allows quick forming, quick correction, and multiple versions in a short time. Cut marks on figures show the chain of operations, blocking out mass, cutting in detail, smoothing, and applying colour. Where at repeat points suggests favoured grips, as when people absent-mindedly rub a round pebble to calm themselves. A final and harder to seize layer is the sense of belonging the figurine creates. In a sleeping space, the mere presence of a small object at your side gives rest and anchor. Its sleep power comes not only from wind and fire sound, but from the tempo of a little daily procedure. Open the pouch, touch lightly, set it nearby. When worries are concrete and close, those simple acts allow the mind to close a few spare doors. That is why the story of the Venus is not the story of a display piece. It is the story of a living object used to the point of wear, repaired, recoloured, and carried from season to season. From faint surface traces and placement in the ground, we cannot force a single meaning. Gather the shards and a coherent picture emerges. The figurine is a kind of handheld cultural capital. It is both personal and collective, both ritual and everyday, both centred on the body and linked to the group's larger cycle. Their density between about 26,000 and 21,000 years ago, together with earlier examples, shows a network of ideas running across a continent, strong enough to hold a shared outline, open enough to absorb regional change. One night the fire sinks again. The figurine rests at the edge of a skin, the ochre drying to a thin film like leftover warmth. On this small surface a soft world is set out. The body is a prayer, red is a thread, wear marks are a logbook of hands. As wind eases at the cave mouth, the little objects continue their quiet work. They keep the memory of nurture from being carried off by the wind. Imagine a map without borders, only climate bands and dark lines where herds move across centuries. On that map, a small human shape travels in someone's hand as a nomadic band crosses river valleys, ice fields, and pine slopes, from the western limestone belts, down the great rivers to cold steppe, then up towards Siberia. Variants keep appearing like notes that repeat a theme while changing the harmony. Each place adds a detail, drops a line, swaps a material for what nature allows, yet keeps the main axis. The body is enlarged at the parts that carry pregnancy and nurture. The size fits the hand. The surface stands ready to accept the red of red ochre. Along natural corridors, rivers are the first guides. Water gives fish, and it also gives direction. On broad banks, people raised branch shelters, spread hides, lit fires, and made ready the smallest caribals for the next day. In riverbank cultural layers, figurines are found in old ash at the side of flint points, and broken animal bones split for marrow. Fine wear lines follow the direction of a repeated grip, evidence that they rode in pouches on long journeys through cold and warm seasons. Natural rock steps into caves are roads too. Many figurines lie near cave mouths where fires once stood, on dry flat floors fit for daily tasks, which shows they lived among everyday life and were not set apart from labour and eating. Open grass farther north and east forced people to optimise all carried things. Their ivory figures hold surfaces that withstand abrasion while sliding against hides and cold grit. Soft stone figures take red ochre well and keep the colour longer in mist. Parallel strokes on a body, seen close, may be carved memory of careful clothing used to meet wind, or simple repeated patterning that gives fingers purchase. They are proof of a widely shared technique, a repeating aesthetic, and a tactile sense refined for movement. Timelines did not stand still. Gravettian figurines, roughly 26 to 21,000 years ago, cluster across many regions of Europe. Between them stand earlier pieces, such as a Western ivory figure dated at least 35,000 years. The span is not a straight line. It looks like a regenerating forest after each glacial season, with seed ideas spread along human paths. Continuity shows in familiar masses. Variety shows in materials and local cuts. When bands met along a river or paused together at a big hunting ground, barter moved not only dried meat and stone points, but also ornament patterns, carving techniques, and ways to use red on a small object. In this way, a symbol network spread without writing and without law, persisting through the persuasiveness of repeated acts. Their presence in burial spaces deepens the web. In pits where the dead were laid, beside tools and animal parts, shells and red ochre remain. At some sites, red pigment coats human bone, a sign of colouring before burial. At others, red gathers on a figurine surface and prints along its base. These details suggest a sequence. Clean, dust with red, place beside what the person used, and close the ground. The stance is not a sharp goodbye. It is a shift of state where the red thread ties both ends. Blood and fire and the sign of life's return. When a figurine goes with the dead, it is not for display value. It goes because it was part of life, a mobile store of belief, light yet weighty, small yet enduring. There are settlements where figurines do not go into the ground, but are set back near the fire to continue their daily work. This dual use says much about how Paleolithic people managed the sacred. In a mobile society, anything kept long must serve many functions. The figurine is at once a support for a woman in pregnancy, a marker of life transitions, a device for activating sacred space inside a temporary shelter, and a gift that binds groups. In every use, the foundations of belief show through. There is a sense of cycle, a focus on nurture, and a recognition that invisible forces can be called by concrete actions on concrete things. Placed inside the broader Paleolithic belief world, the links are clear. Animism runs through a way of seeing everything as ensouled. Red on the figurine is no different from red on skin or red on the cave wall. It lends a surface, a breath. Shamanic practice lives in the half-human, half-animal forms deep in cave paintings and in the way small objects work as props for a leader guiding. Others to the edge of trance. Totemism widens the field. Even when the figurine is not an animal, it can stand for a lineage, a group, a bond. Much as people tie themselves to a natural sign to know one another, the strands weave without dogma and rely on long habit, small procedures, and trust in the rhythm of doing. Long seasonal halts, when ice softens and herds linger on grass, allow deeper time for rites. People repair shelters, cure hides, mend tools, and carve more. Red ochre is ground in greater amounts, stored in shells, and kept dry. Bone flutes and ivory pipes lie nearby. Their simple repeated breath can soften body and mind and open other states. In that space, the figurine may pass hand to hand in a slow order, its surface touching the hands of different people. New red layered on old red. Words are not needed. Ritual order is written into skin through sensation. Mobile belief travels not only by objects, it travels by rhythm. At such stops, exchange between bands leaves marks on figurines. A patch of cross-hatching from a distant region, a new repeat pattern, a red blend of unusual tone. Each detail is like a greeting carried in and absorbed by a local voice. Over time, the open structure of a small object keeps the symbol system from hardening. Everyone recognizes the main theme, and everyone has room to add a regional line. This is how a spiritual theme endures in harsh landforms. There is no center to impose. There are many hearths to maintain. At the end of these circuits are deep caves where wallwork holds another layer of memory. Their human figures are few and stylized, and animals are many, their outlines often hugging natural bulges that shape relief. Hands printed in dark red act as personal signals, and geometric figures sit between herds. The figurine does not belong to the wall, but it shares the language of red and the cut of tools. It is a pocket edition of what the wall speaks in the dark, a portable imprint used each day. When people leave the cave for open sky and fire and wind, the small object keeps at its task, tying hunt to sleep, migration to wintering, birth to farewell. When night lies over a far field and the herds have ceased to move, a small group huddles by the fire. The figurine rests among their hands and the red dries to a fine coat. There is no speech. Breathing evens. Wind slows where it meets the shelter wall. Fire adjusts its own frame. In that soundscape, the mobile treasure of belief has completed its work for the day. It is carried, touched, set down, glanced at, and that is enough to keep the memory of nurture from falling away. In the morning the map opens again with no borders, only climate corridors and rivers that point the way, and in the pouch the small human shape is ready to go on. Looking back over the figurine's whole route, what stands out is not only technique, it's a kind of steady attention. That attention begins with simple, steady acts, like edging a strip of ivory until the surface accepts the hand, or brushing on red ochre until the colour soaks evenly. In each act is the thought that life will continue. Bodies will change, and seasons will come and go. Figurines are a long practice where the hand learns to speak the sacred without words. On the wider Paleolithic ground, the growing density of symbols from about 70,000 years ago was not a single flash. It was a drawn-out dawn. In that dawn, cave art with handprints and geometric forms among animals runs parallel with red ochre burial rites. Deep, hard-to-reach panels, grave goods, and bone and ivory sound makers all say that people set space for the invisible alongside hunting and gathering. The small figure is not lonely. It stands in a symphony of symbols where people and natural beings can trade roles, where red is both blood sign and flicker of fire, and where breath and stone keep an idea of life together. The richness of small human forms does not exclude restraint. Hand size lets the object stay near a person all day. Low weight lets it move through cold seasons. Reduced arms, feet, and faces leave room for the zones tied to pregnancy and nursing. In one sense, it is a community-made body map that needs no lecture and still works because everyone lives inside it. When a young woman receives a figure from an older hand, no speech is required. The polished surface speaks for itself about the duty to nourish, the cycles to come, and the changes that can make a body heavy yet keep a community in being. Transmission was not even everywhere. In some places, figurine traces are dense, in others they are sparse, while signs of other rites are strong. The differences fit a mobile life in the need to optimize for local conditions. Where mammoth ivory was at hand, figures favour pale, hard surfaces and durable fine carving. Where soft stone was plentiful, figures could be rubbed and coloured more easily. Where roots ran long, figures carried regional marks like a spiritual passport. These gaps do not break the pattern. They enrich it with local voices, like one melody blown on many flutes. The presence of Neanderthals in the broader picture thickens the belief field. A very early red hand on the Iberian Peninsula shows that leaving the body's trace as a meaningful act predates the full spread of modern humans in Europe. In caves rich with bear remains, debates over bear veneration have lasted for generations, but the simple repetition of bones in shelter spaces hints at special attention to the forest's strongest animal. In that context, a small human-shaped object, however simple, still sits on the same axis, using a concrete form to point at what is beyond the concrete. Burials from the Middle to Upper Paleolithic show a slow shore shift. Goods with the dead are no longer only tools for use. There are shells, red ochre, food left behind, and at times a thing whose meaning outweighs its utility. Rites such as dusting red, placing a defining object, and closing the earth turn loss into ordered action. Repeating these acts over many generations makes belief in some kind of continuance feel like a habit of breath. In such a scene, the figurine is a gathering point. It lets life gather around one form, and it also lets the farewell gather around the same form. This dual use makes belief less fragile in wind and frost, because it has a place at both ends of a life. Beyond visible rites lie small practices that leave little trace. Before a hunt, the figurine is touched as a habit to steady the heart. Before birth, it lies near soft things so the eye has a calm anchor. After the child arrives and the cry settles into steady breathing, the figurine may lie forgotten on the ground for a while, then is picked up and given a fresh red coat. No authority forces the act. Need learned from experience makes small procedures necessary. The strength of the symbol system lies in that deep layer. Its ability to blend into work and meals and mending rather than live only on rare ritual pillars. Following the call of climate and herds, people carried two maps. One mapped terrain and food, the other mapped symbols. The two always overlapped. Passing a valley with a cave, someone remembers a wall where hands can be printed in red. Coming to a broad river flat, someone remembers the patch of dry earth where the small object can be set so the colour takes evenly. During a long stay on an open grassland, there is time to add a new cut line, both to keep the fingers from slipping and to give hard-to-say thoughts a place to rest. Landforms change and the symbol cord does not break. It rides with the smallest objects carried by the lightest people through the coldest winds, and still keeps surprising strength. From today it is tempting to lay a late name on an ancient thing. The name points to a goddess from a later civilization. While these small objects and the people who touched them lived long before, saying so is not meant to drain the poetry from the name. It keeps the right distance and time. That distance lets us see what we need to see. The small objects were the creations of mobile hunter-gatherer communities who worked in stone, bone, and ivory, learned fire early, learned sewing early, learned music early, and learned to make space for the sacred early. Place them at the right point in that chain and they are not an exception. They are a necessary part of a mind coming into its strength. For a listener lying still, the sleep value of this story likely comes from the even rhythm of the acts. Carve, colour, set down, lift, pass from hand to hand, tuck into the pouch, carry along, place by the fire, mark a shallow grave, then carry again. That rhythm matches the small rhythms of daily life. During long winters, an ancient person used the same rhythm to give the heart another anchor. On a crowded day here, and now a listener may only need the same rhythm for a deeper breath. 1,000 generations apart are joined by a thin line, the line of repeated acts. Return to a campfire at the end of the cold season. Around it are finely cut hide garments, narrow stone points set in order, a silent bone flute, and a shell with red ochre drying. On the ground, a small human shape lies quiet. The surface is smooth from many rubbings. A fresh red has just sunk in. No words are needed. The small object has completed its role. It has travelled through the long day, stood in the moments that called for gravity, and then returned to the ordinary. Fire eases. Wind outside the shelter bites less. Bodies settle nearer. Above is a seasoned sky of stars. Under that sky, a mobile treasure of belief waits for morning to go on. Tomorrow footprints will press thin snow or wet grass, depending on the place. The river will point the way by the pull of its current. The cave will go on keeping deep handprints as waymarks for memory. The small human shape will slide into the pouch and lie close to what is most needed for life. Each time fingers touch it, it recalls a cycle and reminds everyone that nurture is the firmest centre, and that every journey has a foothold in small acts. The last thing left as night closes is only this. It is a calm that comes from a little form that fits the hand, just heavy enough that the hand remembers it, just light enough to go on again tomorrow. Imagine a far-off afternoon when the sun lowers and the light settles into a fine red-gold veil. At the edge of a clearing, a fresh grave opens, small and tidy, round like a giant palm pressed gently to the earth. On the skin of the deceased, a thin coat of red powder has been smoothed on, warm and dry like late light. Around it lie shell beads strung into necklaces, a few carefully chosen stone pieces, a little food and water set by the hip. There is no headstone and no writing, only colour, the smell of wind, and a quiet sense of solemnity. This is an ancient picture of Paleolithic burial rites, where people first answered loss with tender action, and where the red of red ochre became a gentle bridge toward the far shore. Very early burials appeared long ago. In the soil at many sites, archaeologists find graves of great age, showing bodies laid properly, sometimes protected by firm tamped earth, sometimes lined with stones. From about 50,000 to 30,000 years ago, graves more often held grave goods, neat flint points, animal bones placed near the hand, strings of shell beads lying at the neck and wrists. These objects do not feed the one who has gone, but they feed an idea. They say that the road ahead still needs companions, and that those who remain do not wish to send their person on with empty hands. Among those traces, red ochre is a quiet but enduring thread, ground fine and mixed with a little fat. It adheres to skin and bone and makes a red like late sunlight lingering on rock. Prehistoric people smeared ochre on the body before the earth was closed, sometimes dusting it into the grey floor. Red can be the colour of blood, of warmth, of life, laid on the dead. It is like sending a portion of sunlight so the journey will not be cold. The gesture is small, but repeated across many places for many thousands of years, like a wordless language of connection. In the same silent language, shell beads appear beside bone and glimmer simply. Shells were drilled and strung, sometimes lightly dyed with ochre for a shift of colour. Some strands sit at the neck, some loop the wrists, some beads are scattered around the head in a thin ring. The beadwork carries the scent of distant water and recalls long circuits of hunting and gathering, along lake shores and river mouths, Entering the ground, it becomes a token of places travelled, a pocket map of that life. In each bead are time, handiwork, and an evening spent carefully grinding and stringing. Such details show that burial was not a hasty act, but a prepared rite, where the skills of daily life enter the quiet zone of the sacred. In some places, the dead were covered with flowers. In a mountain cave, ancient pollen layers were found around a body, as if family had gathered small blooms and scattered them gently before closing the earth. The brief act pulled an entire forest into the rite, let scent mix with soil, petal colour with red, and set nature beside the person as a companion. These communities had no letters to write a farewell, but they had flowers to say go in peace, shells to say we remember, and red to say life still remains. Through the Upper Paleolithic, graves grew richer, more shell beads, sharper stone tools, sometimes even food and water set nearby. The living still had to carry long distances on their backs, yet they set aside strength for this farewell. The cost bought nothing immediate for survival, but it bought other rights: the right to feel lighter when facing loss, the right to believe the community has a shared place for grief, the right to think that an ending is not only an end. These invisible rights made small bands durable and helped them move together through hard seasons. Alongside single burials, there were secondary rites. In some places, the body was processed before final closure, soft tissue removed to leave clean bone, then the bones carefully arranged. Elsewhere, fire was used as a rite of transformation before bone ash was returned to earth. Each path is a different language for the same question. Behind them lies a common intuition. The body is only a part, and the other part needs a calm procedure to cross to the far side. No complete mythology is required, only something repeated. The living hand performs the final act neatly on behalf of the one who goes. Looking into an ancient grave, what strikes you is not only the objects but the order. Each piece has its place, each soil layer is flat, each sweep of red is even. Order stands against the chaos of loss, and so it heals. The living cannot hold the dead back, but they can keep everything around them straight. In a world still full of surprise, let familiar rite as an anchor for the mind. Seasons turn, herds shift, snow or drought comes on. Yet when there is a loss, the whole group knows what to do, step by step, slowly and with care. From today's view, these burials can be read as an affirmation of symbolic thought. By setting shell beads beside bone, ancient people said small things can carry large meanings. By painting the body in red, they said colour can stand for speech. By leaving a little food, they said action can open hope. Together, these are ways to use symbols to support feeling, to build a bridge across a gap. Because of that bridge, small Paleolithic bands held together, travelled far routes, and carried a ritual alphabet in colour, scent, and touch. Night falls where a grave has just been smoothed, the rim's still warm, a few beads lie half buried in sand, glint faintly, then go dim. The smell of ochre lingers on fingertips. No one speaks much, because all that needed saying sits in what was done. Tomorrow the group will move on across grassland and forest edge, but tonight they allow themselves to grow quiet. In that hush, a new certainty appears. The one who has gone sleeps in the colour of the sun. Those who remain sleep under the roof of the sky, and between the two rests a thin red thread held taut across time, tying one bank to the other with gentle trust. Before the earth closes, there is always a slow preparation. The living choose firm ground above floodlines and close enough to camp for a later visit. They dig with hard wooden wedges and stone blades, shaving turf and root mats to reveal a fine damp soil beneath. Someone brings a pouch of finely ground ochre. Someone opens a pack for the drilled shell strands. Someone gathers the neatest stone pieces with the thinnest edges, as if arranging a small version of everyday life around the one who leaves. Everything proceeds slowly and in order, like a song with no instruments that everyone knows. Red appears first, a thin layer on the brow, along the arms, across the cheekbones, then sprinkled on the grave floor so it glows softly from below. Not every place has ochre, yet its traces appear in far-flung burials. That shows travellers carried colour with them, while those who stayed searched until they found earth the colour of evening sky. The colour is both signal and promise. It tells those who remain that the rite is complete. It tells the one who goes that the body will lie in warmth, not in cold dark. Beside the colour are shells. Small ivory-white shells strung in short lengths are set at the neck and wrists, sometimes scattered into a very thin halo around the head. Inland sites still hold saltwater shells, as if a long journey had been knotted into a few small beads. The beads were drilled and polished, some still stained with red, which means the living had handled them many times before this day. Shell strands cannot feed a body, but they feed memory. They tie a life with tiny points of light, like stars marking a night road. Flowers were carried into the earth too, in narrow-lit parts of caves. Ancient pollen layers preserve a very quiet scattering. Floral traces do not endure like stone, yet they remain to tell the story. Flowers belong to forest, field, and season. Bringing them into the right borrows the scent of warmth to place beside the permanence of soil. In a world where food was uncertain, spending time to pick blooms and lay them on the one who is leaving is a small sacrifice. Yet it turns loss into a shared act rather than a burden borne alone. Stone and animal bone appear as companions. A tidy flint point, a small blade, sometimes a drilled animal tooth. Each says this person hunted, cut, and stood in wind to win a meal. Placing them down, the community closes a life course in its familiar steps. In some places, a separate pit of animal bone lies near the human grave. That may be an offering, a portion of food sent along, as if a meal paused here will continue elsewhere. These details turn a pit into a social map, connecting the dead to work, to season, to food, and to herds. Some burials were for children, small like an armful. There the shell beads are especially many and the strands thicker than the small neck beneath. Adults must have strung extra or taken jewellery from themselves to make a ring of light around the child's head. Here the symbol is not only habit, but a protective cloak. If adults need rites to keep order, children need rites to lie in love. In those small graves, the ochre fits the tender skin and makes the far shore feel less fearsome than absence. Sometimes the rite did not end in one day. After a season the living returned, opened the grave, lifted clean bones, washed them in river water, dried them in sunlight, then reburied them in another order. Elsewhere fire served as a gate of change. The body became light. Then ash was scattered or set in a small pit. These secondary practices were not uniform, but they share a clear intuition. Flesh fails quickly. Memory and identity need stronger means. Rearranging bones, giving them to fire, or adding a new layer of red are ways to tell time that kinship does not forget. When people think of cave art, they recall herds and handprints. Yet outside, around graves, the art of symbols ripened in another way. There is no rock wall to paint, but there is a body to adorn with colour, beads, and order. There is no bison herd running in the dark, but there is a quiet ring of shells around a head. Burial is therefore a stage for symbols where spiritual elements are cast straight into acts. Each movement, from smoothing a hide garment to placing a blade in a hand, is a sentence in an unwritten text. Of course not every place is the same, and the meaning of each detail can vary by valley, river, or season. Still, the core elements repeat in striking ways. Red ochre, shells, stone tools, a little food and water, and a recognisable order. When a rite can travel from sea edge to deep inland across many seasons and generations, it is evidence for a symbolic mind already formed and steady. The same mind would later paint cave ceiling, carve ivory, make music from bone, and lay out farewells for those they loved. Night is when rites enter their quiet mark. When everything is placed, earth is pulled back and pressed flat, sometimes covered with grass, sometimes marked with a few thin stones. Those who remain stand for a while or sit in a ring. Breathing evens, no one needs to speak. If there is sound, it may be a few low notes from a bone pipe, broken and soft, enough to slow the heart. The smell of red still clings to hands. The shells hold a faint salt. The wet earth lingers. In the thick dark, and the far shore appears not as an image but as a feeling, that everything was done right, enough, light, and warm. In the morning they leave and carry a portion of the rite in a leather pouch, a pinch of red, a few beads left over, a blade with a worn edge. These things will return to everyday use and also wait for another farewell down the road. The rite is not only for the dead, it is a way for the living to keep their balance, a breathing practice for the community. With each repetition they learn to set weight down more gently and to trust that the route to the far shore already has calm markers. When the sun rises, dew on the grass glitters like tiny shells. The track away from the burial ground runs toward hunting lands, cut by rock shelves and forest edge. In the pack for the new day are dried rations, stone knives, and the remnants of last night's rite. They travel with the living like a soft charm. No pleading, no threat. Only a reminder that the order of loving, grieving, farewell, and moving on has been set in place. When the early wind touches the faint red still on fingertips, everyone understands the same thing. This bank and the far bank are not two alien worlds. They lie in one circle, tied by warm red, by pale shells, and by hands that know how to do just enough at the right time and in the right place. Some places in stone speak softly of human memory. In a dry valley of southwest Asia, fine soil under an old cave floor still keeps the outline of a body that lay long at rest. Around that outline, pollen grains crowd like a little sunlit dust. They are not random. They cluster near head and chest and suggest a slow act took place. Someone brought flowers into the dark to give to the one who left. Flowers do not keep their form, but pollen outlasts memory, and it says the rite had a scent, had the colour of a season, and that a hand once chose each stem. On limestone slopes in Europe, many upper Paleolithic graves show a more complex order. The body is set in a given orientation, knees drawn up, hands crossed on the chest or laid along the sides. At some sites, powdered ochre covers face and chest. Seashells glint at neck and wrists, although the grave lies far from any shore. The drill holes are round and even, and their edges shine from long rubbing by sinew cords. Near the neck there is a thin stone blade. Near the hip there is a smoothed animal bone. Together they make a structure with grammar. Colour is the subject. The beads are a whispering modifier. Stone and bone are verbs already completed. The story is whole before the earth closes. Rites could extend beyond the day of burial. Many secondary pits prove a return. When flesh had left bone, the living opened the earth, lifted, ordered, and laid the bones deeper. Elsewhere fire was used. The body grew light and dry, and ashes were scattered or placed in a small grave. Variants like these show a clear sense of change. Flesh is brief. Bone lasts longer. Ash is the finest state, while name and memory must be carried by other things. Shell strings, tooth pendants, and stone points with clinging red serve as letters that do not fade. At some sites, animal bone pits lie beside human graves. Deer antler, antelope long bones, a jaw from a large animal. Perhaps they were offerings, a portion sent along. They may also name the link between the person and the herds they follow through the season. Each group had its familiar list of species based on their ground and roots. Where continental ice withdrew, reindeer appear often. In light woodland, deer and wild horse leave thick bone traces. Setting animal bone beside human bone declares a truth of the life cycle. People live by herds, and in imagining the far shore the herds remain, moving as they moved and trading seasons as they always have. Deep in some caves, bare bones occur in numbers. Some suggest people gave this animal a special place and saw it as the strong beast of the dark. Others say bears simply use caves for winter dens and the bones are a bear's own trace. Either way, the presence of large animals beside ritual signs suggests a spiritual landscape where the boundary of human and animal is not hard. On rock walls, half human, half animal figures are not rare. Outside the cave, these halves become ties that warn and console. A totem or guardian spirit may have been named by bone pieces, by a drilled tooth worn at the neck, or by the placement of bones in a rite. Grave goods for children are often small beads and in greater number. In some graves, the bead count far exceeds that of an adult. Most beads are old and worn and show they were taken from jewellery in use. Lifting beads from one's own neck and wrist to restrand them for a child is a gesture of granting. The child, though life was short, is placed inside a border of symbols the group built through hardship. In such graves, ochre is dusted lightly and makes a soft red glow around the head. Here red is like the warmth of a hearth and stands in for a swaddling not yet sewn. Stone tools placed with the dead are rarely unused. They are often a blade with rounded edges, a point with a chipped tip, a small scraper worn thin. Returning used tools, the living close a task and do not leave it open. In camp stores there are still new straight sharp edges kept for tomorrow. In the ground lies the edge that has finished its story. This order is simple and gentle. It does not boast wealth or rare things. It asks only for the right object, in the right place, at the right time. By the sea, salt water brings bead types inlanders do not have. Small shells round to the touch, with pale grain, turn the colour of sunset when rubbed with red. Far inland people still have similar beads, which shows exchange networks already existed. Seasonal meetings at river flats or mountain passes were times when shells traded for stone, food for pigment. When someone died, the bead string brought far landscapes into the right, as if the one who left did not depart a valley but crossed a wide map carrying sea colours, mountain patterns, and field scents. The sound of a rite can be seen with the eyes. Finger swipes along the grave wall, the pattern of laid soil, the placement of a flat stone as a cap. The pulses are even, not rushed. Even rhythm leads the living out of the tight zone of grief and back into a known schedule. Many groups left a small mark on the surface, a thin stone set on edge, a notch cut in a rock lip, a wisp of grass tied with fibre. These are not headstones in the later sense. They are small reminders for a return visit, enough to guide a hand to the right spot as evening falls quickly. Red, white shell, grey stone, and the cave's dark become a palette for the right. On a bright day, the palette shifts by the hour. On a rainy day, it deepens and closes. Climate changes, ice advances and retreats. Fires move from river edges into caves and back again, yet the palette changes little. Such repetition is the durable part of awareness. Not every detail holds a single meaning, but persistence with a few key materials lets a community record a spiritual history with simple things. When an elder dies, the rite can grow fuller. Thicker beadwork, more stone blades, sometimes wide swaths of red like a coverlet. Not for material value, but for time distilled. This person taught how to drill shells, just polish holes, size beads, choose ochre, grind it, keep it dry, mix with fat, and store in leather so it would not mould. They knew which stream after rain yielded the best red earth. Laying many such things down, the living honour a material memory where skill and symbol are woven beyond separating. At last the earth is pulled back and the surface made smooth. Hand-stained red touch the ground lightly, then wash in the nearest water. The red fades, leaving the damp soil's scent. A stony slope leads the living back toward the light at the cave mouth. Everyone knows the band will return one day. Not to correct anything, but to recall. To lay another thin layer of memory atop the old. These thin layers bring the far shore closer, not to the eye, but to the body's habit. A spiritual map of the Paleolithic can be drawn with very few lines. A ring of camps near water. A cave mouth that faces the wind. A route that follows herds, and a quiet place where a person lies down. Between these points run the thin lines of symbols tied by shells, by red, by worn tools, by animal bones set alongside. The lines are not visible on the surface, it says, but when you dig, they appear like an old text. To read it, you need patient eyes and a steady breath. The longer you read, the more reassuring the repeats become. The first repeating point is colour. Red ochre goes with people from shelter to grave and from grave back to shelter when graves are reopened. Colour on skin puts life into the right. Colour on the grave floor puts warmth under the back. Colour on tools ties object to person so that even unused they still carry the old hand. Colour keeps heat in memory and lets remembrance stand longer in the wind of time. The second repeat is beads. Small, hard, easy to carry, or easy to share, or easy to restring. Shell beads pass through many lives. From a hunter's wrist to the neck of a growing child. Then into the grave where they remain. Where around the drill hole is a kind of history. A history of abrasion rather than words. Paleolithic people did not write, but they made long-ordered strings. Those strings are the text of the body, of farewell, and of return. The third repeat is the order of tools, not always identical, but rarely careless. A blade near the hand, a point near the chest, a scraper at the hip, a bone knife by the knee. Repeating placements soothe fear. Anyone who has smoothed the eyes of a loved one at death knows the hand needs a task done right. Setting things in their places is work for the hands, and through that work the mind accepts the passage. The fourth repeat is food and water. Many graves show traces of food, fats soaked into soil, small bones from cooked animals, a little water left in a wooden bowl or shell. These signs are fragile, but enough to show the living wanted the journey to begin with a last meal, not hunger. In a life where meals always require care, setting aside food for the dead is a generous act that reaches beyond short-term counting. The fifth repeat is returning, not only to clear bones, but to visit. Footprints layer around a cave mouth. Stray beads lie on the surface dropped by someone who sat a while. A few grass stems are bent, The ground is flatter than around it from many sittings. There is no calendar for a reunion. But bodies remember seasons. Each time the winds change, the group finds its way back, sits a moment, tips a marker stone, sprinkles a pinch of new red, then stands and goes. Seen within the Paleolithic as a whole, spirit and material life are not parallel. They weave together. People learn to keep fire not only for warmth and cooking, but to entrust bodies to it when needed. They learn to grind stone not only to cut sinew, but to trim a shell string for grave goods. They learn to build shelters not only to keep wind off, but to give a place to sit quietly before a farewell. Every small technology lays a brick in a spiritual house, and in turn each lasting symbol motivates the keeping of those skills. Regional differences make the fabric richer. In the cold north, hide garments stitched tight with bone needles cover nearly the whole body, and the dead lie within the protection of materials the community made. In warmer zones, plant fibres touch the skin and may leave threads traces when the earth closes. Near the sea, shells are many and strands long. Far inland, pigment is plentiful and red swathes are broad. Such variety does not break the shared core. It is variation on the same theme. You might ask why communities that must worry about food and seasonal movement spent such effort on rites. The answer sits inside the day's rhythm. Small groups need reliable cooperation to survive. Ritual strengthens trust through shared action and shared time and goods for something that gives no immediate return. Someone strings beads, someone drills holes, someone grinds red, someone digs, someone washes hands at the stream. All take part. After the rite, the group enters the new season with knots retied. Burial is not only for the dead, it is a lesson in solidarity for the living. In the Upper Paleolithic, while cave art blossomed, outdoor rites were refined. The person who painted a wall may also have arranged goods on the ground. Half human, half animal figures in caves and pits of animal bones outside are two faces of a single axis of imagination. One face is for images, one face is for acts. Together they form a full spiritual picture. It does not produce a creed. It offers the means to pass through loss and stay balanced before a vast nature. By the end of the Paleolithic, ice receded to roots widened and exchange networks thickened. Yet the core elements of rites did not vanish. Red stayed red, beads still shone, stone was still placed in the hand. That says that beneath the shifts of climate and landforms, people held a spiritual routine that worked. It needed no great architecture or rare materials. It needed only a cord and a few small things easy to carry, so it travelled with people to many riverbanks, sea edges, and ice margins. When you close your eyes tonight, or picture smooth, damp earth. The warm smell of red like hearth ash. A small string of beads touching and making a faint sound. Picture hands doing the right work, not hurried, not lacking, though they belong to a very distant time. These images feel familiar to anyone seeking peace after a long day. Paleolithic people found a way to set weight down lightly, to set loss inside a frame that holds, and to go on. Through colour, through beads, through stone, through flowers, that way still speaks. It reminds us the far shore is not a strange place. It is the part of us that remains in one another's memory, kept by small acts that are even correct and warm. A breath enters a hollow bone tube, and in the cool darkness of the cave that breath turns into sound. The sound spreads like torchlight touching stone, trembles, then returns, carrying the voice of the space itself. There is no stage and no seats, only rock, fire, and people. From the deepest reaches of the Paleolithic, this is how music enters our history, not through notation, but through the resonance between human lungs and the cave's interior. The oldest instruments needed no rare wood or metal strings. They rose from the materials most familiar at the time. Long bones from birds or small animals, tusk from large beasts, a groundstone tool, river sand, and patient hands. After marrow was drawn and bone dried, the maker thinned the rim, drilled small holes at intervals learned by experience. The holes did not have to be cast perfect, only even and smooth enough for a fingertip to seal. One end of the tube was shaped into a mouthpiece. Lips touch, breath is pressed, the tone follows the column of air. The first note is usually sharp and short. Later notes lengthen and soften, then fall into ordered sequences. Every bone flute is a memory of practice. It remembers hands learning to hold a long, steady breath. Remembers when a hole was drilled a half grain larger. Remembers the tiny crack when an edge chipped. Remembers a drop to the stones and the later regrinding before use resumed. It was not only flutes. On windy nights, drum rhythm appeared without a drum in the later sense. One hand on stretched hide drying by the fire made a thick tone, the other on a hollow log made a dry one. Two stones struck together made a high click. Feet pressing lightly on the ground made a low thud. In the cave's soft air, these four easy sounds could frame a beat. Some stood close to the fire, some stepped back into shadow, some sat, some leaned. Each spot answered with a different echo. Music was not only something produced, it was something shaped by where bodies sat, by distance, and by the hearth's heat. Sound and painting do not separate. In caves where images were set deep and few visited, flute or rhythm was unlikely to be for simple amusement. From the art already discussed, people then accepted altered states of consciousness as a road into deeper imagination. Flickering torches, repeated beats, longer breaths than usual, eyes adapted to the dark, all pushed the body into another tempo. In that tempo, the half-human, half-animal on the wall no longer hangs suspended. It seems to move within the firelight. No one needs a lecture. The right is grasped by heartbeat and swelling lungs, by the lift of hairs on the arm when a high tone meets the arch's answering echo. A key detail of these spaces is the route. A cave is not a square room. It is a chain of chambers, narrow bends that require a crouch, openings wide as a giant bell. Walk a long corridor and blow a note. As you step into the open chamber, the colour of the sound changes. It lengthens and thickens. Sometimes a second voice seems to arrive from behind. The first time makes anyone start. The next time you choose where to stand for the right effect. A simple piece becomes a path. Begin near the entrance with the easy notes. Move into a narrow place to keep the tone from thinning. Go to the great room to open the breath. And stop by the wall where figures are carved or painted and place a short phrase. Listen as it twists into the dark, then falls silent. That silence is part of the music. A crowd is not required for strong resonance. Two people are enough. One keeps time with hands and feet, the other plays. When hands are even and feet are even and the player can let the breath run long. Long breath slows awareness. Slow here is not sleep, it is less hurry. In the slower tempo the cave's small details appear. Drops fall from a spur of stone and make a natural metronome. Wind slips through a tight crack and threads a fine tone. All of this lays a bed over which the bone flute rises like a white line. The line may go straight, may curve softly, may return to where it began. No one instructs, yet when the line is enough the beat will stop. It stops clean, as when a torch is snuffed. That clarity helps the right hold. Beat and breath are not only for night. When a community must travel far, up long slopes, through open woods, across cold rivers, they need a frame for hours of breathing. Elders know how to count steps with hand rhythm, when to lift the pace so the band clears an exposed flat before the wind, when to lower it to save strength before a descent. A short flute phrase repeated helps children keep to the adult's cadence. On damp sand, the footprints fall in an even chain. Later that chain is carried into the cave for a night with ceremony. In that way, outdoor sound and cave sound speak to each other as two parts of one day. Bone and ivory flutes feel different in the hand. Bird bone is slender, light, cool, quick to the lips. Ivory is thick and heavier, holds warmth, gives round, warm tone. Makers did not need fine names. They chose what was at hand. If that season brought a large animal, a small tusk chip made a tube. If migration left many roosting birds, long bones offered choices. A group did not need many flutes. One or two sufficed. The rest was hands, day, a log, stone, and ground. This fits a moving life. Light objects are easy to carry as when rhythm already lives inside a stepping gate. Sound also has its place in burials, not loud, not driving. A thin row of notes spaced by silences long enough for breath to return. A soft figure of hand on dry hide. A ring of feet around the pit. These bring the living into one cadence that settles into shared consent. When the earth closes, the last sound is usually low and short, like laying one flat stone to finish the surface. Then the fire dims and leaves a warm bed. People leave the cave carrying that sparse beat on the path home. The next night the beat changes, not to forget, but to continue. Cave sound is also a mirror for the painting. Stand near a herd painted on the wall and draw a long note. The bodies seem to shift in colour. Snap a short note past a set of geometric marks and the sharp pulse draws the lines forward in the eye. There is no interpreter, only a sensing body. That body has learned rock's language by hearing echoes, watching firelight, and stepping in rhythm. In this way, abstract ideas like change, the far shore, and guardian spirits need no definitions. They are understood through cycles of sound, cold, light, heat, dark, and quiet. Cave acoustics are a natural lesson. No one knew the word resonance, but everyone knew there were small places that carried far and wide rooms that swallowed sound. Groups who passed through many caves learned each place's acoustic map. Here, stand a little left. There, take 2 steps back. Keep the low note here. Hold the high one short over there. Such short rules passed by a hand laid on a shoulder, by torch position, by faint charcoal marks on the ground. A rite is therefore not fixed. It adapts to the cave's shape like water to a riverbed. As ice withdrew, winds shifted, and herds took new routes. People carried their old cadences to other caves. Some walls were dry and rough, some damp and smooth, some chambers high like a well mouth, some wide and horizontal like a mountain's belly. In each, a chain of breath finds a way to sit well within the stone. However different the surrounding, 2 core elements do not change. Breath moves from lungs into a tube, and beat moves from hands into ground. These are the least costly parts of any rite and the most durable, because when nothing else can be carried, the lungs and the hands remain. Night's quiet, smoke light, stone cold against skin, and a flute lies snug in a leather pouch. On another day it comes out again. The holes settle back under fingertips. The breath drops lower and lengthens. The same sound, the same vault, yet each time new. Because the band is different. Because a wall now wears a faint new charcoal streak. Because last night's drip quickened. Because today's memory adds another loop to their chain. In that repeated but changing pattern, prehistoric music does its work. It keeps the community together, opens a small door to the symbolic, and reminds them that every durable spiritual road begins with a breath that knows how to listen. Early music did not stand alone. It stitched together other steady practices of the Paleolithic, on the same rock face where animal figures curve in torchlight, handprints with red ochre stain and chains of geometric signs sit together, and sound is the unseen part that makes them glow at once. A long-held tone stretches time across stone. An even beat steadies the shared heartbeat. Through that coordination, people touch symbol not by concept, but by sensation. That feeling lasts longer than words and can cross thousands of seasons. Those who made flutes also understood bone. Small bird bones demand careful drilling because the walls are thin. Bones of small mammals are thicker and allow a wider mouthpiece for lower tones. Mammoth ivory or large animal teeth can be grooved internally to adjust the air column. There was no ruler marked in units, but hands and eyes were intimate with each material's native curve. Finger holes were not laid by a fixed formula, but by the ear. Set the second close to the first for a specific interval. Set the third farther to climb. Try. Listen. Adjust. Each small correction is a lesson stored in group memory. When the maker left, the flute remained as a lesson written in matter. The cave itself was a teacher of sound. A low ceiling makes high notes glare. A deep alcove draws out low notes like wool thread. These spots were marked not by words, but by a faint charcoal line. A pebble tucked into a crack, or a heel print pressed deeper into damp floor. In another season the group returned and still recognized the simple schematics. Thus the sequences that made up the rite could be replayed closely enough, even when the player changed. Tradition here is not copying exactly. It is keeping the core beat and the way of listening. The drum rhythms of that time had many faces. A work beat for hands scraping hide so the tool moves evenly and does not tear the edge. A fatigue-chasing beat for long walks so the band alternates quick and slow steps. A mealtime beat, light and short, that lets children settle in an adult's arms. And a ritual beat, slow and wide, so the whole group's breathing runs in one path. Bodies recognize these beats through whole body feeling. It is an easy language to learn because everyone has lungs, heart, and muscle that answer. In nights that went deep into trance, sound was a safe raft. One person held a long note, another kept an even beat. As torches dimmed and eyes adjusted, as painted forms seemed to step nearer, the raft of sound remained for all to lean on without getting lost. Altered consciousness was not for leaving the world, but for seeing the same world under a different layer of light. At the end, the sequence returns to short, low notes. pulling awareness back to the body, to the hearth, to the work of preparing for dawn. Music is also a map of time. The season of returning birds has a particular phrase. The long rains carry their own meter. These signs tie to fruiting plants, herd routes, river levels. When one group met another, they could read the season just past from a brief flute line. The language crosses differences of material and habit, because it rests on nature's changes that both live within. It was not necessary for elders alone to hold the beat. Children learned quickly, especially the even parts. A child counts on fingertips, taps a shin, then lifts their eyes to the painting with a gaze already inside the shared cadence. Because the cycles are easy to remember, dense knowledge of plants, rivers, paths, and animals can be folded into short sequences and passed on. A long tone links to a river's name. A clipped note hints at a turn where unusual rock begins. Music and memory bind, not for performance but for smarter survival. Instruments were not only tools of rite, they were tools of intimacy. Evening outside the cave, wind light, the smell of dried hide, a few scattered notes prepare sleep. Someone tries a note learned that day, holds the breath not too long so children do not wake. That light touch belongs to the culture of sound. Music does not dominate living space. It wraps it like a well-fitting cloak, warm but not pressing. At some outdoor shelters, standing stones form a natural ring. Place a hollow log at the centre and pat the rim with the hand. The tone runs out and bounces from the jagged faces around. Shift the log a few steps and the sound changes outright. Small discoveries like this feed a habit of trial. Try stepping back. Try stepping forward. Try half covering a hole with half a fingertip. Try using the mouthpiece edge. Try moving the listener. In every trial the rule holds. Listen for the space's reply. The space is a strict but fair teacher who always answers by consistent law. When the community held a burial, music framed action and feeling in order. Like grave goods, a bead string, a shell fragment, a tool piece, were set in the pit after the last low note. The silence that followed was where hands lowered and eyes fell. After the earth was smoothed, one final short phrase closed the book. Later burials kept that frame with small changes by season. In high wind there was less sound, so the torches would not die. In damp weather the beat stretched because feet slowed on slick floor. In caves with deeply carved walls you can see traces of a rough acoustic map, little clusters of marks where the echo answered just right. No one wrote directions, but by repeating at the same spot the next people understood that place mattered. Art and listening merged. A new painting was placed not only because the wall was flat, but because that spot answered sound in the desired way. Likewise, a sequence of notes was chosen not only for beauty, but because it made the painted area seem more alive. On migration routes, sound also served as signal. A few short notes marked rest. A quick high line marked clean water. A low phrase warned of boggy ground. Such audio signs were familiar to ears trained in caves. Under the open sky, people still felt as if inside a walled space, where sound carried clear information and a sense of safety. In early music, there was no split between performer and audience. Everyone belonged to the sound. The flute maker ceded the instrument to the one with longer breath. The timekeeper stepped back to hear drops falling at the cave's nape. The one tending the fire sat on a small stick so the light would not glare on the painted panel. Each held a small part so the whole rite moved smoothly. This cooperation rested on the absence of surplus objects and of decorative roles. Every act contributed to the shared experience's quality. Sound and fire always travelled together. Fire dried high to the right tension for striking. Fire warmed an ivory tube so the tone rounded. Fire cast shadows and made geometric signs tremble when the beat thickened. Fire was also a test. Too hot and surfaces dried too fast and tones grew harsh. Too weak and damp muffled them. Fire's balance sat in the keeper's hands. That person listened not only with ears but by the smell of smoke and the warmth on the face. Senses worked together to hold a delicate balance, just as a rhythm is held to what the body can bear. At a deeper level, beaten breath opened ideas linked to animism. A long note before the image of an animal was a greeting. A short phrase after passing a handprint was a mark of remembrance, treating sound in relation to image, rock, and darkness as equal conversation thickened the sense that everything carried a portion of life, belief in spirits present in stone. Wind and water rests on concrete sensation. No elaborate analysis is needed. Symbols stay by the power of experience, or as when first light pours into the cave mouth, sound steps back into the background. People tidy up, check whether a flute's edge is still smooth, touch the hide to feel if it is tight, tap the log to see if a crack has opened. These small tasks close the circle. There is no formal marker, only care for tools and shelter, which is care for a piece of memory to be used again. Leaving the cave, they carry few objects. They carry many rhythms folded into their bodies. Thus, even on new ground, under a differently arched roof, against rough or slick walls, they can rebuild the raft of breath and hand. That raft bears the group through night, through right, and through those parts of life that require one another. Early music also walked with a deep red of ochre. Grinding mineral pigment for painting, people stirred in animal fat for better adhesion. Fingertips stained red touched the wall, then without thinking tapped the stretched hide beside the fire to test dryness. From that motion a short beat formed, the short beat called a long one. A slender breath line from a bird bone tube joined like a thread. Sound and colour stuck to each other in one space. Each time they played, it was like laying another thin coat on collective memory. In the morning the wall held the colour and the air held the notes. The painting did not stand alone. It was bound to a sound cluster the body had already learned. Ivory flutes with hollowed cores have thicker walls than bird bone. They give round. Sustained tones suited to the middle of a rite when the group is breathing together. The mouthpiece may be filed slightly askew so a sudden bright note can flare then settle. There is no ruler, but the tinier symmetry is a conscious choice. It shows a wish to shape feeling through material. In other bands, the fingerholes are not evenly spaced. The unevenness is not a mistake. It is an answer from the ear to a cave with its own echo. Caves differ, so tools differ. What lets the whole be recognised is the way the sequence is organised, opening with a low note, spreading the middle with long breaths, closing with a settling tone followed by quiet. Rock taught listeners the curve of sound. Place the player where the cave narrows and the note shoots and sweeps back like a wheeling bird. Place the player where the floor tilts slightly and the tone vaults overhead and disappears into the black ceiling. They tried, and they marked. A pebble in a fissure, a charcoal stroke fine as a feather at arm's reach, a damp footprint in clay. Such plain signs made a wordless acoustic map. In a later season, returning, others read the map by eye, then read it again by ear. The cave's memory and the people's memory weave, and the rite keeps its frame though persons, seasons, and hearths change. Drum rhythm had work beyond rite. It kept labour true, kept travel steady, kept sleep. When a drying rack must hold a hide just right, an even pattern lets the scraper draw a stable line that does not cut the edge. When the band crosses mire, a slow deep beat helps feet fall together on firm spots. When a child is hard to soothe, a simple repeating pattern at low volume, fading gradually, lets a small breath join the holder's breath. These functions had no names as concepts, yet they shaped habit. Over time, everyone knew which beat fit which situation without discussion. In passages that moved deep into trance, sound anchored. The long breath keeper held one even line. The hide keeper held a steady pulse. Torch flames shifted with the breeze and the animal shapes on the wall trembled like living things. Those seated near the wall felt a faint vibration up the spine when the low note touched the cave's belly. No one explained that tremor, but everyone knew when to sit still and when to change posture, when to pass a pinch of red to a neighbour. The whole seemed scripted, but it was made on the spot by listening and answering. Sound also marks time when there is no calendar. When reindeer shift routes, a high note is added to the usual phrase to announce movement. When the river rises, the gap between pulses narrows to remind all that rest will be shorter. Small changes suffice for distant listeners to grasp. Along a continental journey, sound works as a mobile sign system. It needs no wall to cling to. It clings to lungs, muscle, and the memory of many people at once. Some groups carried a thin sheet of hide stretched on a light frame, not as thick as the main drum inside the cave. The lighter hide was meant for the trail. Its tone does not carry far but reaches the last walker without alarming forest animals. When night drops suddenly on a bald ridge, that thin hide is one of the few things left that carries the feeling of home, because its beat is exactly the same as the shelter's beat. Under unstable conditions, repetition is comfort. It lets a slice of the collective soul keep its shape while circumstances change. Sound also shaped how people dealt with the dead. When the pit was deep enough and the grave goods set, a low tone was held for a known length. It allowed saliva to be swallowed, the first clod of earth to be released, the torch to quiver once and steady. After the covering, one very soft short sequence ended the burial. In later seasons, passing by. Someone needed only to replay the first two tones. Those who remembered supplied the rest in the mind. The rite thus continued in memory and did not always require the scene. Those who made flutes and drums did not name themselves as special. They knew the nature of matter and of breath. They knew how sun tightened hide, how damp swelled ivory, how a hairline crack in bone whistled and should be avoided. Set into a ritual setting, such material knowledge made them natural leaders of tempo. To others they were neither above nor below. They held a role. Roles turned with age, strength, and the group's root. Rotation kept knowledge from pooling in one body and spread it through many. There were nights of heavy rain when the cave breathed damp. The firekeeper chose wood that smoked little and fed it to dry without flaring. The hidekeeper sat closer so warmth would stretch the skin just enough. The flute player rested the tube near the knee to feel a faint tremor past the shin. Fine adjustments kept tones from breaking, notes from turning harsh, beats from slipping. Caring for tools and for the space is part of the rite. For if the object is not in good condition, the sound betrays. And if the sound betrays, the group cannot move together. Sound, image, and trust weave inside animism, a line of notes before an animal figure acknowledges its presence beyond the rock. A low pulse before a stained handprint greets the human part that remains. Treating the wall as a present being builds the habit of seeing a world full of other silent persons. Water, wind, and moon each speak in their way. When a band chooses an animal as its sign, there is no need to carve a name. A beat is chosen that echoes the creature's form, path, and habit. Later, by the beat alone, others can tell who recently visited a far cave. Because possessions were few, people were adept at making little into enough. A broken bone tube could be ground into a short flute for nearby paths. A leftover ivory chip could be drilled into a whistle. A sheet of hide, no longer perfect for drying, still stretched for a small beat. Decisions like these made a toolkit suited to a mobile life. The tools were light, fixable, shareable, and not tied to a single person. Such structure let rites stay flexible without losing their core. Sound was also social glue when tension rose after failed hunts or hard routes. When strain mounted, the timekeeper fell back on the familiar mealtime beat. All counted quietly on fingertips. Regular repetition lowered the body's alarm. Then choices about direction or division could be made in calmer air. No one called it release, but the effect of repeated rhythm on the mind was widely known by experience. Music helped sustain the group's soft justice without commands. Deep caves hard to reach were not frequent stops, so each entry was special. Sound there was sparser and chosen with care. Begin in silence, then one low note, then another pause. Not for lack of breath, but out of respect for the stone's strange reply. Each person listened to measure how the rock answered that day. If the return was quick, the beats drew closer. If slow, they spread. Instant attestation let early people meet what was beyond them with concrete data. It was belief through senses, not propositions. Sometimes, as in unfamiliar country, a band heard an unknown sequence. They paused and answered with their short phrase. If the other side answered with a low note and quiet, it meant peace. If the other side quickened the beat, it warned. Such reading was not rare because many groups used sound as signed, though languages differed. Rhythm's organisation ran through the body and was similar enough to understand what was needed. Across wide journeys, such basic understanding helped avoid needless clashes and opened doors to learn from each other how to choose shelter, keep fire, or build bone-based houses where wood was scarce. Belief in an afterlife soaked into sound as well. Before closing the grave, a thin coat of red ochre might be smeared on wrist or brow. Then a low note was held long enough for everyone to feel the air column in the chest touch bottom and rise together. The shared sensation of touching bottom and rising is a common experience, an image for a crossing. No one restated it in words, but anyone who had been through that moment knew why goods were set at the right side, why beads needed to touch once before release. Sound ferried them over like a little boat made of breath. Near the end of each cycle, when the hearth settles to a gentle heat, when hide is taken down so it will not dampen overnight, when flutes are wiped with a dry sinew, what remains is the air. It holds smoke, fat, wet stone, and human scent. In it, the body keeps an automatic slow rhythm. That rhythm underlays sleep. There is no lullaby, yet blood whispers in the ear. The heart rests mid-sternum. The wind slides thinly across the cave mouth. Sleep organized by sound is sleep inside a web of very fine but durable signs. That web lifts people at grey dawn and leads them into another night when needed. Step back to the cave mouth and gaze down the valley. All of this is small action. One extra hole, one edge eased, one repeating beat, one kept silence. These small acts repeated over thousands of seasons thickened Paleolithic spiritual life without a temple, an altar, or a text. They are soft and strong, flexible and ordered. Through them, music became an invisible, intricate infrastructure that let a mobile community hold itself steady amid ice and sandstorm, dense forest, and broad river, and when darkness is thickest, when painted forms have slipped back into stone, there remains a single note fine as smoke drawing from a bird-bone tube into the air. It hangs for a long moment like a thread tying sleeping people to a world-changing season. Then it thins into the night, light as the hearth's last breath. In that thinning, the rite closes with no final speech. At morning to Sekten, when sun pours into the mouth of the cave, the first beat forms again, enough to waken memory of how to step, how to hold a blade, how to lay a hand on hide, and how to blow one long note to the point where the stone answers. So life continues, calm and deep, beneath the nameless roof of the Paleolithic. When night drops over an old valley, the stars bloom like silent seeds. Fire throws orange light onto damp stone, revealing a ring of footprints worn by many windy seasons. The breath of wind and the soft crack of embers set a slow ground beat. In that space, the symbolic mind of early people opens like a quiet door. They look at the sky, the earth, the rock, and feel something looking back. In a time before fields of grain or fixed roofs, small bands of hunter-gatherers stepped into the dark with a simple intuition. Everything around them carried its own spirit. Trees, animals, springs to clouds, and mountains had an invisible life. That subtle ground is what anthropologists later called animism, a way of understanding the world not by hard fences of concept, but by living relationships. At the edge of the fire, figures sit shoulder to shoulder, windbreaks of softened hide around them. Beyond the lit circle, the dark thickens like a blanket. Imagine a hand dipped in red ochre pressing onto rock, warmth still resting in the palm, pigment filling the whorls. Those handprints, later found deep in caves seldom visited, are a quiet claim that humans were here, speaking to the stone and to the unseen within it. From there, a finer world picture forms not only food and clothing, but a thread binding people to beasts, to wild seasons, to wind and fire. A nomadic tempo lets them taste many terrains and cycles. Each stop brings a shelter. Saplings tied and weighted with stones topped with dry grasses. Daylight is soft steps on wet moss. Eyes tracking hoof marks along a river's sand. Hands peeling edible roots. Night is fire sound, bone flute, knocks on hollow wood, and listening inside silence. Out of this, animism is not a doctrine but a way to breathe. A gentle pact between hunter and prey, the living and what has left. Everyone knows all things change places with the seasons, so gratitude comes naturally. A little fat to the fire, tendon to lash a log, a smear of ochre to mark a narrow escape. Ritual arrives as easily as keeping warm, as singing while crossing an empty vale. Within that view, the totem rises like a marker of identity. Each small band, perhaps 20 souls, chooses an animal as its sign. Not to rule, rather to remember the way home. Horns notched on a spear shaft, a belt cut with scale motifs, a pair of wings half hidden in shadow upon a wall. The creature is not only meat, it is a durable letter between ancestors and the living. Amid 4 shifting horizons, the totem holds a bearing. At a riverbank, one band dots ochre into a line. Crossing grassland, another tucks a feather into a rock crack. Such simple marks are both memory maps and greetings to the place's spirit. Children see these signs before they grasp their meanings, and when grown, they learn to add one more. Identity is not stored in books. It lies in footpaths, in colour on stone, in quiet order at the food share. Archaeologists sometimes find figures half human and half animal in deep caves. A human trunk, a horned head, legs set to bounce with a beat. Not jokes, rather clues to a power, the imagination of transformation, entering the animal spirit to know the world. Hybrid features, sweeping lines, geometric signs laid by the beasts, traces of a mind passing through an altered state. Scholars call it trance. For those living with rock and wind, it is simply the hour when breath, drum, and darkness join into one road. The shaman, in this setting, is neither lord nor ruler. They keep the rhythm and the memory. One remembers the paths to hard-to-reach caverns. Another knows which charcoal yields a velvety black, how to mix fat with bone ash to make a lasting tone. A third hears a cave's echo and picks the spot to speak. In the right, the leader walks from firelight into depth, leaving small prints. Others follow at a natural distance, not crowding, not breaking the sound. Some caves seem shaped by stone to throw back knock or flute. Acoustics wrap the body like a cord and slow the stream of thought. As the body settles into a steady tempo, the inner picture clarifies. They paint animals with muscles taut as if moving, draw repeating lines like a heartbeat. They lay hands on the wall, spray pigment, and leave a silhouette that survives 1,000 seasons. These hands are not signatures. They are a vow, a thread knotted between person and stone. Elsewhere, prints likely left by Neanderthals show that symbolic need was not the monopoly of one humankind. Art and belief are not separate rivers. They are faces of one flow. Animism gives a language of sensing. The totem gives a durable emblem for the group. The shaman walks first in the dark and throws light back on the path. The body itself becomes ritual ground. Red ochre, alive in tone, is brushed onto skin, into hair, onto tools. Red as blood, as sunset, the colour of heat and change. After painting or after a meal of gratitude, people rub a little onto the arm. Not loud, just a quiet act. It warms the body and the memory. This time we received, next time we repay. That loop of return nurtures trust that an unseen order exists, and that well-being comes from moving in time with it. Some burials, especially in the Upper Paleolithic, hint at faith in a farther shore. The dead are laid straight in a pit, sometimes under flowers, sometimes ringed with shells, sometimes with ochred bones. Grave goods are simple, a finer blade than usual, a short string of shells. Animal offering traces near some graves imply sacrifice. No sermon, but a message life does not end sharply at the pit's edge. It flows like water into the ground and rises elsewhere. Farewell rites are not to cling. They set the departed back into the great turning. In that world, the totem binds a band to a species sign. Some choose bison, some choose birds, masters of reading wind. Some choose snakes, icons of shedding and cycles. The totem appears on tool hafts, pendants, carved bone and ivory. Repeated notches and spare curves carry more than outline. When groups meet, elders read each other by such marks. Recognition may open sharing, migration news, warnings of low water. Thus a totem is both spiritual emblem and gentle social gear that coordinates and avoids conflict, well suited to small mobile communities. On a night of valley wind, a shaman sits long in shadow or letting bone flute meet heartbeat. There is no hard line between music and rite. Sound is another way to touch the unseen thread binding all things. A few knocks on a hollow log, a slow palm on a stretched hide, enough to focus the body. Then the inner lights of geometry, zigzags and spirals arrive alongside the favoured beast. Cave art records those inner events in the durable language of line and colour. The leader does not cast spells in a modern sense. They hold time, keep the mind safe, know when to lead in, and when to lead back to the fire. Not every rite demands a cave. Sometimes only a patch of ground, a trunk as post, a strip of feathers at eye height. The rite is exacting only in timing. When herds move, when the new moon climbs, after a storm, when strangers come, when a child earns a personal mark. The frame is simple, open in thanks, proceed by symbol, end in silence. The silence matters. It lets feelings settle so the rite can take shelter in memory. An hour before dawn, the sky blurs blue. On the rock a fresh band of colour dries. The smell of fat in charcoal lingers. Like fire, last night's meal, hide just hung. Here, hands of many sizes sit side by side, the signs of ages. People think in symbols, not because leisure abounds, but because the world is unpredictable. Symbol gives shape to the uncertain, turns fear into rite, turns hope into form. Set onto stone, it becomes a mirror for the community. season after season. Animism also grows a survival ethic. No one hunts alone all year. No one knows every herd path without neighbours' stories. Belief that all things have spirit yields soft rules. Use but do not exhaust. Take and then return. Hunt and then give thanks. From a modern angle, this is resource management. From the old angle, it is the right manners in a spirit-filled world. Stacked animal bones near shelters. Fat reserved for the fire. A horn hung at the entry. These are the moral language. Sometimes they travel far and find a cave locked by time. Inside, echoes make a special chamber. The leader lays a hand on the wall, feels the cold, sketches the lines within the mind. New images never stand alone. They join the spaces between old ones. The wall becomes a slow, many movement score. Here, a hybrid face turns toward the mouth. There, a herd in a ring. Between them, repeating curves. The whole composition shows an instinct for order and offering. The panels are not constant hunting scenes. Often animals seldom eaten appear. Signals that the aim is symbolic beyond the practical. The totem steadies people under hard nature. Lean times, long winters, changed rivers. Under pressure they retreat to familiar symbols. A palm stone of ivory clenched in hand. An ochre line recasting a horn's arc. Promise of warmth to come. A feather in a thong. Storm will pass. These are not luxuries. They are light and hand-sized, like the small Venus figures later found. Their portability fits a moving life. Their value is largely of the spirit. Shamans learn to gather stray memories into larger story. They know the order. Open with the totem's sign, add beaten dark, then let imagination step through the window of inner geometry. At the deepest point, the participant becomes the animal, lays or stands beside it. The rite ends with a handprint or a fresh line, a silent minute of record. Back at the fire, they eat as usual, share as usual. The weak get the tender cuts, the long walkers the fat. Children crowd the warm. That division is also a rite, not only a meal. Living amid risk, they feel layers of safety. Material is fire and stitched hide clothing and windbreak shelter. Social is the circle's arms and flexible roles. Spiritual is animism and totem and rites that place each person rightly within the larger turn. When one is sick, they are not left. Breaking the circle breaks the world. When a child is born, a small hand sits beside a larger hand. The loop has meaning. What later becomes complex religion begins here. A survival ethic braided with symbol. Another day they stop at a broad rock face. Fat mixed with charcoal draws the curve of an animal's back. Ochre marks where emphasis belongs. If there are horns. A bone or stone berren cuts their shape to raise relief. Natural ridges become spines, so bodies seem to swell when fire leaps. The aesthetic is subtle beyond the roughness of life. It demands foresight. How light will run across the plain at night. Many images sit in hard-to-reach places on purpose, to keep them sacred, to slow the feet of those who come after, deepen breath, sharpen listening. Elsewhere, a small group climbs rock to farewell their dead. The body lies in a pit, perhaps under flowers, perhaps dusted with ochre. From above the rite is plain. In the deep it binds both shores of life. Death is not a severing, it is a step. They leave compact goods at the side as if for the road. A drilled tooth on a thong, good firestone, a polished bone sliver. These prove their trust and continuance. That trust is not separate from animism, totem, or shaman. They are strands of one net. By noon, sun warms a new red hand. A child looks up and lays a smaller hand within it. The meaning is not yet clear, only that the fit feels right. Belonging needs no declaration, it needs a rightness of feel. That rightness is the quiet work of Paleolithic belief, finding the mind a place to rest so a harsh life becomes a meaningful one. Night descends again. The fire circle closes into a single rim of light. Young watchers trade shifts. Elders lean to stone with eyes shut. In uneasy sleep, painted beasts seep into dreams. The drum still faintly ticks. By morning they will go, track herds, test water, count new grass. But the night's work goes with them as another map. The map of meaning. In the last hush before embers die, a palm grazes the wall one last time. Not a goodbye, a mooring. Pinning to the common story so that, far from here, someone still carries the soft ramparts of memory. In that minute they sense that all things breathe. Stone with cold, forest with shadow, river with mist, Sky with stars, fire with coals, humans with symbols. Such lives, repeated across generations, forged a cultural capital archaeology would later learn to read. Moderns name animism, totemism, shamanism, altered states, acoustic corridors. For contemporaries, they were simply ways to hold the world steady long enough to tell a tale, to paint a hand, to let a child feel itself growing within a circle. Each handprint, each ochre mark, each beat is a letter in the alphabet of darkness. To read it is to read ourselves. On a faded path, a blade of grass tilts in wind. Thin light lies on a rock lip. Sparse tracks lead to a bare patch where an old stake stands, a ring of dried sinew and a weathered feather tied to its head. The totem is recalled by such small things. Not boundary posts to own, rather signs to remember and to promise. Remember who sheltered here. Promise to return in the right season and at the right tempo. Do not take too much. Do not drain the whisper from the grass. Bands move by seasonal cycles, but never rigidly. Weather can turn, herds can veer, water can leave a known bank. Each journey is a rereading of the world, cracks in mud, cloud forms, the firebite of an eclipse. When faced with the opaque, people slot it into their symbol frame, repeated marks, totem, rites of thanks and farewell, naming the unseen with ochre, black, and fat. Shelter is the screen for the body. Symbol is the screen for fear. Both let travellers cross a wide world without getting lost inside themselves. Where slanted slab stones abound, they raise a quick shelter. Stakes driven till walls plaited, door turned from wind. In the floor, a fire pit is scooped deep to keep coals hot. Smoke slips out a roof gap and smudges the inside. Strings of small bones on a branch click in a faint breeze. Not quite music. Enough to remind them the place is alive. Supper is unhurried. Before meat hits the fire, a bit of fat drops to the coals, the quick hiss a greeting to the dark. Repeated across seasons, the simple act becomes habit. Across lives, habit becomes right. Right in this age has no lectern. It is learned by eyes and hands and breath. The young learn sitting beside elders and listening to the silence between two knocks. In a cave with sharp acoustics, the leader tests a pallet, hollow wood, stone on stone, a bone flute's drawn line. The cave answers in layers, like stacked winds. From that, people pick their places. Torch placement is not random. Flame must graze natural ridges so the animal seems to move when light trembles. Such use of natural contours shows a fine eye and a gift for prediction. When light and colour and sound mesh, the body drops into focus. That state opens doors for those hybrids and curling patterns that later scholars call the brain's script in trance. Within that frame, the totem is the key that locates a band amid many signals. See a horn cut, know who passed, see scales, old friends nearby. The sign lets two bands share news softly, avoid clashes when water is low. When food is plenty, the sign opens a quiet festival. Shares pass to neighbours, smiles under lamp-black eyes. Exchange is both a survival tactic and an ethical lesson of animism. Respect the spirits of place and species. Respect the big cycle that gives and demands return. By night, small things gather by the fire, a thin polished ivory sliver, a bone plaque cut with parallel, a shell string long carried, jewellery, and also gentle charms. The totem pressed into them like an initial. Children beg to hold them or turn them in light and hand them back. The moment teaches that symbolic chords belong to the circle, not a single hand. The circle here is larger than those seated. It holds the dead or the unborn seasons, the herds yet to drop. Another band, mud-caking ankles, halts at a smooth rock and lays hands, small, large, slender, broad, at different heights like notes on a scale. In a corner, a print with a darkened wrist shows someone who survived many cold seasons. That hand is now a window into an unnamed life. The window opens onto two levels, presence and greeting to the rock's spirit. When the two line up, peace follows. Peace is fuel for tomorrow, as fat is for a held fire. Sometimes rites happen under open sky. Stars are many. Dry grass whispers under wind. They set stones in a simple shape and place in the middle something from the sea, a shell. Though they are deep inland, a far object becomes a bridge, reminding them journeys are networks, not lines. Here the totem does not appear in image but in sound and in foot rhythm and in a held breath in unison. Then it all disperses and work resumes. Someone gathers wood, someone sews with a bone needle, someone strips sinew into thread, someone sharpens a point. Material life runs on right after ritual, the two faces of the same stretched hide. A trail squeezes through a tight rock gate. The leader calls for quiet, not for fear of beasts, but because the slot hums when wind passes, like the place's own breath. They cross without cutting that breath. On the far side, a rock bulges like an animal's back. Someone adds horns with charcoal and circles the flank in ochre. The drawing remains behind like a clear greeting, for those who come later and for the region's invisible powers. Upper Paleolithic burials tell another part. Some bodies lie on soil blushed as if the earth had drunk ochre. Elsewhere, shell collars sit at the throat or side. Goods are light and apt for travellers. Good flint. A fine point. Light ornaments. In some caves the dead lie neatly, knees drawn, faces toward the sun's familiar course. If there are flowers, they're a rare soft layer between rock and wind. Burials do not thunder. They soothe the big question by small acts. The aim is not exhaustive answer, but continuity of the circle and of its way of living. Over seasons, totem signs gather details. Horn notches with a dot, scales with a new wave. No written law, yet the pattern holds. Recognition persists through time. Thus, a later band at a strange wall can still find the familiar sign. Update routes. Pick a storm refuge. The totem here is a soft map. No coordinates. Landmarks of motif and beat. Reading such a map is not learned in a season. It is the inheritance of sharing caves and banks. Echoes and handprints. From a distance you can see animism and totemism and shamanism forming a surprisingly stable frame for a fragile life. Animism grounds ethic and taste. All things deserve regard. The totem grounds identity and linkage, a name and a sign and a voice in a network of other bands. The shaman keeps practice, choosing time, tending the group mind going in and coming out of the dark. The three are not separate, they alternate and layer and yield. Where caves are fit, art flowers. Where grasslands spread, totem signals refine. Where winds are cruel, shamans keep them all kinds of beat to warm the group. One cloudy afternoon they pass a bright rock valley. The walls wave like surf. Old layers sit under the new. Some beasts there are not common prey. Big cats slipping in shade. A bear reared up. Their presence does not rehearse a meal. It rehearses vigilance and power and a rhythm in which humans are not on top. That goes to animism's core. Honour the wide order, resist centering oneself. Keeping that tempo helps the spirit, and it is a strategy for survival through long change. The group pauses at an old river, bars of gravel exposed. Tracks web the pebbles. Elders read. Small among large suggests families. Broken prints of a fawn at play. Such reading lets them choose a direction better than chance. The choice still passes through right. Before turning left toward the easy slope, a pinch of ochre falls by the stake. Not to move the water, rather to make terms with the place about leaving. At the new meadow, light knocking opens the night's circle, a greeting on entering someone else's house. Bone and ivory flutes, blown slowly, sound clear. In deep shade, that clarity falls like steady drops. Sometimes one plays, sometimes two trade, not to perform, rather to hold a long timing. Sound and paint and hands and cuts and red braid into collective memory. With it people weather turns. A thin hunting year, go back to right, not to beg for what will not come, rather to set the mind. A sound mind makes sound choices. Choices open sane roots open chances. Science will later chart this loop. Then it was simply keeping time by the fire and painting at the right hour. At times a feathered stake falls in a gale. Next morning someone raises it and ties better. No one calls it trivial. The stake is a word in a larger sentence. When the word drops, the sentence stumbles. Setting it back is restoring the line. The totem is thus symbol and work, untangling thong, retying knots, wiping lampblack from the cut face. Sweat dots the grass and sun dries it quick. There is no border between sacred and ordinary. Every daily task has a sacred side if done at the right time, in the right way, with the right temper. Another day the path nears what tradition calls the gate of echo. Even a speaking voice splits into layers and runs between walls. The leader does not shout, just taps a few beats and lets the echo live. Then a panel at chest height is rubbed with black-to-ground fine ochre lines. Geometry appears before animal zigzags, concentric rings, dotted chains in even time. Only then the backline of a beast, the horns, the eye. The order has reason. Geometry is breath. Animal is name. When breath and name meet, the image lives. The viewer not only sees, but hears a faint inner pulse. In hard months, a light charm in a pouch goes everywhere. Shell beads tick on bone when running. Enough to say the story continues. It need not be told aloud. It shows itself in small objects, in a footfall on firm ground, in stopping before entering a strange place, in not turning one's back to the wall when the fire is lit. On the surface, these are safety rules. In depth, they are animist ethics. Live as if among fellow beings. Treat the world so and it grows less savage in the heart, even if it stays wild outside. On a grey cold afternoon, they camp at the forest edge. Children pick dry seeds, adults raise a low windbreak. The shaman's task is not in the cave tonight, but in the dim at the wood's rim, dividing work, sensing who is tired, who is anxious. A slow beat begins, just to smooth the water of the mind. When it holds, a quick drawing is made on rough hide, not rock. The totem at centre with dotted waymarks. The hide is rolled and stored, not a map in our sense, rather a way to frame a decision. Because the frame is symbolic, it stands firm inside. Sometimes they meet strangers. First, careful distance. Later, a gentle acquaintance by laying both totems side by side. If it feels right, they trade path news, crossing the mire, skirting dens, finding hidden springs in odd stone. These will live later as geometry on a wall, notches on a handle, or knots in a cord. Knowledge travels softly across generations without writing. Each small thing in early hands is more than a tool. It is one splice in the group's long line. If someone leaves the circle by age or illness, the window opens toward the far shore. Few words. The known posture, the living colour on skin, the few helpful goods. Near a cave, a small mark may be left so the band walks lighter a while. Light not from fear, rather respect for transition. When that beat completes, the knock returns to evener. The rite is like a watch schedule shared by the living and the departed, keeping the circle running smoothly on both sides. Centuries later, successive viewers of paintings and handprints and ochre fields see a thought form close to modern symbolic life. No print, yet a syntax, open with geometry, name with animal, sign with hand, close with blank. No book, yet chapters, each panel a passage, each recess a parenthesis, just each entrance a fresh page. No temple, yet cadence and placement and zones open and set apart. Gentle feast days rather than loud ones. These build a natural religion where sacredness is not decreed by rule, but by living in the wind's right direction. At dusk by a drained marsh, the band leaves the freshly painted wall. The fire pit is covered, coals buried. Old tracks brushed so beasts are not drawn back. Before the wood's edge, a hand touches the rock where the new animal rests. Not farewell, a mooring to the common tale so that far away someone still carries the soft ramparts of recall. In the last pause they feel all things breathing, stone with cold, forest with shadow as river with vapour, sky with stars, fire with coals, people with symbol. That night the sky opens a thick river of stars. People lie closer against the wind, collars snug, feet braced in hay, heartbeats fall slow, ember ticks fade. In dreams, someone sees a zigzag like moonlight on water. Someone sees horns curve into a doorway. Someone sleeps deep in pure warmth. All are in place, as the layers of Paleolithic faith sit in place beside each other. Morning, the road goes on. Tonight, everything fits. At dawn, light traces cuts and red dots and soft black lines, waking each sign like blades of grass. By the old fire, a few ochre smears remain on fingertips, red as sunset caught on water, dust brushed off, small things stowed, straps settled. They glance, nod, and go. The path ahead is earth and stone and grass. The path within is animism and totem and the shaman's breath and the hand upon the wall. The two lie over one another in silence, wide enough for the band and for old memory and for time moving. From that slice of sky, the Paleolithic creed appears not a string of stray myths but a coherent practice. Animism gives ethics and aesthetics for living with nature. Totemism gives a symbolic language for self-recognition and coordination. Shamanism keeps tempo, acoustics and light and images and rite, guiding the band into focus and back to support practical judgment. These currents join not only to answer metaphysics, but to serve daily survival, choosing ways, dividing food, mending after loss, holding steady in hard seasons. Like any long music, this story's coda shrinks into quiet. A rock face with an old hand warms under early sun as if just placed there. The hand is not one person's, it is an era's. It says humans arrived, spoke in images, heard in silence, lived as if all things breathed. From there the species ranged far, yet at every far step flickers a red hand in a cave, a ring of dots, a horn-cut line, a thin flute, an even beat. Such small things are the night's leftover warmth, the last torch in the tunnel. The ember passed through generations to the present hand. Close your eyes and the wall ripples faintly. The heart falls into a distant drum. Breath returns to a steady state. Far from caves, you can still hear a thin drip of sound. The voice of Symbol, ancient yet fresh, whispering that the old night's gentle order still has a room inside you. Just breathe and let it guide you towards sleep, where the far shore is as soft as this one, and where everything, once again, sits in its right place. Night is now deep enough for the stories to thin like ash. In the mine's cave, the ochre path remains. A red hand rests beside zigzags and dotted rings catching firelight. Somewhere a bone flute has just drawn breath to a close and yielded to even breathing. What passed was not scraps, but a fine weave. Cave art. Palm-sized Venus figures. Graves dusted with shells and red. The drum that focuses the body. Animist faith, the totem thread between bands. Each detail a strand. Together they make the warm cloak ancestors wrapped around the mind to cross a world wide and cold and radiant. Seen slantwise, these practices are technologies of memory and calm. Ochre is not only pigment, it marks life onto the far shore. Handprints do not merely assert presence, they bridge those who came before with those newly arrived. Cave acoustics do not just beautify sound. They pull minds into one tempo so the group decides more wisely when it returns to herds and banks and winds. What we call belief and symbol once were tools of survival, like a sharp flint, a tight seam, a pit that keeps coals alive. Even now, let the body recall that order. Drop the shoulders, soften the jaw, let breath go a little deeper and spread slowly. Each cycle a red dot placed evenly on a wall, each exhale a soft black line linking the dots into a gentle ring. In the pause between breaths the panel clarifies. Beasts not merely for hunting, but reminders of ecological rhythm. Human-animal hybrids not to frighten, but to show change. How a mind steps into and out of a settled state. Picture the hearth lowering, ash mantling coals, warmth to last till dawn. Small things are wrapped, shell beads and thin ivory and dry sinew. They will travel tomorrow, pocket signs of a greater memory. Outside, the wind's edge dulls. The human ring is closed. The stories are set. Overhead, the sky turns slowly. Stars trade places just enough to remind you the greater order keeps its pace. As this chapter folds, lay your own hand against an imagined wall. Touch to anchor the quiet so that, when midday noise swells, you still know the return to tempo. Old symbols do not vanish. They change address. From rock walls to the mind's inner face, from torchlight to an even breath. There they keep their old work, holding the centre, setting the sentence to the right rhythm, placing us rightly among breathing things. Now let the eyes rest like coals under ash, heat kept and glare gone. Let memory stack the strands just woven so the cloth is softer and warmer at dawn. If a ripple of image remains, leave it there like the cave's last lamp guarding sleep. And when sleep comes, let it fall like sand over tracks, like dew over the meadow behind, like a red hand folding into the walls dim. Until next time, when the pit's coals glow again, and the old signs return under the gentle light of a new night,